I trust in you. In you. Oh Lord, say it. Oh Lord, Jehovah. Come on, everybody, get your feet happy. Let's go. Come on. Where my islanders? Can some of y'all run down here to the front real quick? I gotta know who's in the building. Where my islanders? I need y'all to run down here. Come on, let me see you. Come on, Jehovah, say it. Jehovah, say it. I trust in you. In you. Say it, y'all. Oh Lord, Jehovah, I trust. Say it. I trust. Show me how to do it, y'all. In you. I believe. Say it. Say it. I believe you. I trust. I trust. Come on. In you. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. Jehovah, you. Where y'all at? Come on. Come on. I trust in you. I believe. Say it. I believe. You are the God of miracles. You are the God of miracles. You are the God of wonder. You are the God of wonder. You are the God of powerful. You are the God of power. I believe. Say it. I believe. I believe. I believe. I believe. I believe. Say it, y'all. I believe. I believe. Come on, let your feet get heavy. Let's go. Let's go. Come on. Somebody make some noise in here. Come on, catch it, Jehovah. Jehovah, I trust in you. In you. Oh Lord, say it. Oh Lord, Jehovah, you. I trust in. I believe. Say it, everybody say it. I believe you. I trust. Come on. In you. Oh Lord, y'all got your part over here. I can't hear you. Come on, say it. I trust. Say it. In you. I believe. Say it. I believe. You are the God of miracles. You are the God of miracles. You are the God of wonders. You are the God of wonders. You are the God of power. I believe. I believe. Say it, say it. I believe. Now everybody get radical for 30 seconds. Come on. Dance on the devil's head. Come on. Come on. Come on. Y'all ain't radical enough over here. Balcony, I can't feel you. Move your feet, everybody. All right, folks. Yes, it is about that time. That is 5 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock in Dominica and the rest of our Eastern Caribbean. Welcome, welcome one and all. Welcome to the program called Civic Vibes each and every Sunday from 6 o'clock. So those of us in Dominica, those in the region, those further afield, welcome on board. We're starting with this sort of religious song this evening. Come on, say it. One of faith, huh? Everybody in the building, right now. Sung by Mr. Jonathan Nelson, entitled I Believe. Goodbye to my pain and my sorrow. Do you believe? Let's go. Do you believe, Dominicans? Do you believe, those who are listening and watching already? There's some form of encouragement, some form of empowerment as we're about to make a start in just a while. To all the sick and the shorting out there, good evening to you in a very special way. We at Civic Vibes, we sympathize with you. We empathize with you. Whatever you may be going through at this time. The Civic Vibes team, yes, we feel your pain indeed. But guess what? Tomorrow is a better day and tomorrow will be a brighter day for you. Huh? So whatever you may be going through at this time, just believe. Just believe. Hey, so long. believe things will get better. So yes, folks, a very, very interesting conversation is awaiting us this evening. We have two of our better or brighter brains in Dominica in the name of Mr. Claudius Sanford and also Joshua Francis. And so yes, they have made some time for us this afternoon come to speak on a very relevant topic, why government's budget matter to us, the citizenry. We just had a budgetary presentation in Parliament Friday gone. And so, yes, some of that we will be touching, or they will be touching rather. But yes, it is a very, very important topic indeed. Just why we go through this process every year in democracies across the globe, like us in Dominica, and we talk about budget allocations and everything and anything to do with budgets. As I said, we have two of our brightest brains in Dominica, Mr. Francis and Mr. Sanford, both economists. And so yes, they will be unpacking or breaking that down for us indeed. So that yes, you and you out there can better understand why government's budget every year, they do matter to you. That is the education session here from 6 o'clock, Civic Vibes, we're on. Share the live, share the live. All those of you already on the live, thank you very much for your eyes and ears each and every time. Your responsibility, as it were, is to share that live information. Make someone know that conversation, that program is on, and they can participate, they can partake as well. By calling in sometime later when you open up those lines, the numbers are 245-2396, again, 245-2396, or 615-9470. These are the two dedicated numbers to getting your contributions. Those of you on Facebook, those of you on YouTube, thank you very, very much indeed. Without saying much more, let me move across to the erudite brother, Mr. Alvin Thomas, and say hi and hello to you. Alvin, good evening to you, my brother, in a special way.
Yes, Lofty, good evening to you, my friend and brother. See you look pretty bright. You're wearing a yellow today. Yellow is bright, you know. Yellow signifies sunshine. Huh? Well, I don't know whether you and Josh were exchanging emails, because I see all you come there with some bright colors. You all didn't tell Claudius and myself. So look like it's bright and creamy.
Yeah, that brightness and creaminess will rub off by the end of the program, for sure. So have no fear.
Yes. But indeed, it's a pleasure to be back for yet another Sunday Civic Vibes program. And like you said, we have two distinguished guests with us this evening in the persons of Joshua Francis, my good friend and colleague, and then Claudia Sanford, my good friend as well. I think both eminent to be able to discuss and have a conversation. What I like about these two gentlemen is that whenever they present, they don't present like, given the fact that they are experts in their own right, economists, they have a conversation. They present in a way that the average man would listen. And it just strikes me, Lofty, that if we were to go out in Dominica, across Dominica tomorrow, Monday, and ask the question, do you know where there was a budget address? Do you know what's in the budget? Do you know how much money that government is going to spend? I wonder what kind of response you would get. What percentage of the population would be able to respond in some sort of affirmative and say, yes, I heard the budget, yes, whatever, you know? And I'm saying this to say, though, that a nation budget is more than just numbers, okay? Whether it's a 1.3 billion, 6.5 billion, it is the government's plan for delivering services, managing public resources, and shaping economic and social priorities. That's basically what it is. And in a democratic society, the structure of the budget and citizens' oversight are vital for transparency, accountability, and trust in government. So I'm making that opening comment as I welcome the brothers to say, though, that it is more than just numbers. I mean, you're on the ground, Lofty. Last week, I asked you about garbage I see all over the country. Garbage services. We saw the health situation compromised. We saw agriculture compromised. So it's good to go in a parliament and say 1.5 billion or 2.5 billion. But how does that relate to the people?
Yeah, how does it matter to the citizen?
Obviously, both Claudius and Josh will break that down for us and tell us exactly in the overall scheme of things, when we talk about the budget or we look at government's budget, what exactly are we talking about? So guys, sit back, relax. I see most of you have already logged in. Let's make that a very engaging conversation.
Indeed.
So that at the end of the day, we can live better informed and in so doing, to be able to take some action as well. That's one of the things Civic Vibes always ask, is that after we have provided the information, we expect some action to be taken. So welcome on board, guys. Good to have you.
All right, Alvin, thank you very much, my brother, indeed, for your opening comments here. Let me just say good evening to some folks who are already here with us. We always appreciate their company, indeed, before we go across for the opening remarks of our two guests here this evening. Marley Austri, you're there. Good evening to you. Eliza, Louis Gomes, Magdalene, Augustine, you're also there. Claraline Warrington, you're also there. First, good evening to you. Marley's calling a number of people to come on the live with her in terms of their participation. She's calling Judy Berry, Celia Gordon, Estella Labassiere, Brother Margel Durand, Rosie Nice, John Joseph, John Alfred, Owen Prosper. Marley's calling you guys. Dana Philbert Peterson, you're also there. Good evening to you. Bernadette Myla, you're also there. You said good evening, Lofty, Alvin, the viewing audience, and distinguished guests. Ivinia Joseph says, present teachers awaiting A+. Good night, patriots. Good evening to you as well. Ivinia Joseph, indeed, and your household. Joanne Green, you're also there. Joanne is saying, hi, Josh, hi, Lofty, and others. Good evening to you as well, Miss Green, indeed. Rosa Robinson, Brother Peter Carbon, Julie Polidor, Stephanie John Baptist, Franklin. Yes, let me just, if I could get back to that list here. Franklin Bradshaw. Good evening to you, my brother, in a very, very special way. Simeon, George, and all those of you who are there, names too numerous to mention at this time. In the interest of time, we have to move across to our guests. Let me say a special good evening as well to brother Joshua Francis. Francis, no stranger to Civic Vibes. Welcome, sir. We would really and truly appreciate your opening remarks, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Lofty, and good evening to the panelists, distinguished gentlemen, and to all who are on the platform this evening. It's always a pleasure to be among such distinguished gentlemen. And this evening, I'm looking forward to have a very fruitful and productive session, one which will be interactive and it will be a benefit and edification to everyone on the platform. Of course, I feel honored to be in the presence of you, gentlemen. My Kalinago brother here, Sanford, I will basically be supportive and supporting. He's a leading economist here.
Okay.
You know, and he's directly involved in the business. You know, as you know, he's attached to Dominica State College and teaching the theory and actively involved in the mechanics of what's happening in Dominica. So, gentlemen, I'm hoping that my contribution will be of great value and it will be appreciated. Once again, thank you for having me here.
Yes, indeed, Josh. Thank you very much again on behalf of the team and the many folks listening and watching. We always appreciate you being here with us. As a matter of fact, when the promo went out and you guys' name came up on the promo in terms of Josh and Claudius, some persons called out to me and said, Lofty, I will be tuning in. I met a brother in the market this morning. Is in the market time? Yes, in the market. He knows his name. He's listening. He says, I will be tuned in, brother. So just, you know, deliver as usual. So guys, people are listening. And again, thank you very much. Brother Sanford, good evening to you, my brother. Again, it's not the first time being here, but we always appreciate your time. and your information to be dispensed here.
All right. Thank you very much, Lofty. Thank you for inviting me here. I always look forward to interacting with you and Brother Thomas. And again, as Josh pointed out earlier, it's always an honor to be with Josh. You know, both of us have the Kalinago blood flowing in our veins. So to have both of us to talk about the economy of Dominica on one program, that is very telling and very important, I believe, from the Kalinago perspective. So I look forward to the interaction as well, and hope that we can all benefit from the information that we provide here today.
Yes, indeed.
Lofty, it's ironical when we were putting this program together and those two names came up, that somehow it never crossed at the back of our mind, the Kalinago connection. I mean, we never made that connection. We just felt at the time they were both economists, they both study economy, and they're versed in that particular field. But somehow the Kalinago link didn't come, and it's ironical, man. But that's good. Sometimes, the university has a way of bringing people together, and I think that's just what's happening here.
Yes, indeed, and it did. It did align in our favor, Alvin, having these two brothers on. Ferdinand Lawrence, you're tuning in. Good evening to you. Dorian, Dorival, good evening. Carol, Bruni, you're also there. Ramona, St. Rose, good evening to you. Guys, we're going to start to discuss, we're going to unpack, as it were, a topic in my mind that has sort of, eluded some folks in Dominica for some time. When some folks hear about the budget being presented in Dominica, some people, they are lost. And so we decided, having a budget, went through Parliament, passed in Parliament last Friday. It would be fitting to have, as I said, two of our best brains in Dominica as it pertains to numbers and the crunching thereof, to sort of help us understand why really a budget to any country, any democracy is very, very important. Just why it is so crucial that a budget is presented where certain things are laid down, and you'd want to think it would be in the interest of the citizenry by and large. So I'm going to start with Brother Sanford to help us understand why countries have budget presentations. And then, as Joshua said, Joshua will assist him in terms of, his contribution this evening on that all-important topic. Please feel free, folks, at the top of the hour, 7 o'clock, we're going to give you your opportunity as well to interact with the brothers. So your question, comments, suggestions, whatever it is, can be directed at them. They are here to help us, as it were, travel or traverse that economic road, as it were, this evening with this conference. So, Brother Sanford, just why countries have what we call budget presentations?
Well, let me just quickly, in light of what the question that Brother Lofty posed, keep that in mind, but parallel it along the lines of a home or an individual, a family, so they could do that. Parallel
to break it down.
Why a budget is important. So yes, answer the question, but let's parallel it. So a basic family environment, why a budget is important.
All right. Thank you very much, Lofty. Thank you very much again, Mr. Thomas, for the opportunity. My presentation this afternoon will be one that is very general, economic perspective, but during the discussion, we'll go in and reference as much as we can the recent budget that was passed on Friday. And as Alvin said, to think of it in the terms of the family, and that is really and truly the basis of the whole study of economics. It came from the word oikonomos, which is a Greek word. That's where it started its origin. And that in itself means one who manages the household. So in the management of the household, you would think about, How much do you spend on food? How much you spend on utilities? How much you spend on a vehicle? How much you spend on your children education? And that will give you the sectors of the budget that applies to a family. And if the budget is done well and the income is there to support the expenditure, then you have a progressive family. If you have a budget that is not well structured or it is not disciplined in the approach into the revenue versus the expenditure, you will have money that is spent on things that is not within the budget line, and you will find that family will maybe live in poverty and really have not a high standard of living. So in its basic fundamental way, that is it. And you can use an example. For example, if a father is the breadwinner in a home and he brings in $1,000 every month, and it is properly budgeted for education for the children, for food, for utilities, for savings, for transportation, and it is done efficiently, then you'll have a happy month. But if for some reason he meets his friends on the roadside and he spends $200 drinking beers and having a good time, then when he gets home, something has to be sacrificed, and it's going to bring all the emotions from his wife, and his children going to be without maybe snacks for school, the education going to suffer. And if that is a repeated cycle, then you would see over the years, and the family would, you could actually see the deterioration of the family, both in terms of their well-being, which is the physical, materialistic aspect of it, but also the emotional and psychological aspect of it. You will see the depression, you will see the unhappy faces, you will see the children into the social negatives and so on. So in a nutshell, you can translate the home management with the income it have and the expenditure, and then you can expound that into the whole nation. So if the budget doesn't allocate enough for food security in agriculture, then you will find the cost of food is so high, we cannot eat healthy, and then the health aspect will surface, and then it means therefore that the health aspect has to get more, and if it's not getting more, then we see problems at the hospital, we see problems at the secondary level healthcare system, and then even at the health centers, the primary healthcare system. If that's enough for youth and sports and education, then you realize that the curriculum is lacking, you don't have the human resource to support the economy, young people leave the country, and you see the brain drain, and you have the management aspect now will surface, where you'll have to select management from the little that is left, which is not high quality, and then the whole decision-making process, the cycle continues in that downward spiral. So in an essence, you can relate the management of the household and the management of the country. You can see the transition there. But as Alvin said earlier, budget is not just about numbers. It is really a plan that shapes your daily life, from the roads you drive on every day to the schools your children attend. So the national budget is really what shapes that. So let me see if I can break it down as much as I can within the time so we can have a discussion. So first of all, the budget is the foundation for public service. The government budget that was presented has the two sections. It has the capital expenditure and it has the recurrent expenditure. The recurrent expenditure is what the government spends almost, over and over every year. And all what they do is do some small incremental changes to it every year to ensure that teachers get paid, nurses get paid, doctors get paid, the policemen get paid, the roads are maintained, and so on and so forth. So what are these public services? I will just list 4 of them, but you can always add the others: healthcare, education, infrastructure, national security, or what in some countries we call defense, right? In the Dominican context, Dominica is a developing country based on the perspective you look at it. In other areas, in some areas, you may even say it's an underdeveloped country. If you look at some of the areas, Alvin just talked about garbage collection. If you were to look at Dominica now and look at the level of mismanagement of garbage in the country, you can classify it as an underdeveloped country. But if you look at maybe the education system, the achievement, the numeracy and literacy rate in Dominica, you can qualify it here maybe as a developing country. So some sectors, would point the radar to developing countries, where in other areas we can say, we are underdeveloped country. Now, healthcare budget allocations determine whether clinics have medicine or doctors. For example, a well-funded health budget can reduce maternal mortality rates, which is directly impacting family. The mortality rate in Dominica now is pretty high compared to what it was before. And one can say that the healthcare in Dominica, would do with, better budget allocation, and not only the allocation, but the efficient use of those allocation. And I'll come to that in a while. Education, funding schools mean more children can learn, breaking the cycle of poverty. So the idea there is that with a better education, people should pull themselves out of poverty. You make better decisions. You use your income more efficiently and wisely, and you make social decisions that would, uplift your life. So education is a critical element of any national or government budget. Infrastructure, we're talking roads, electricity, water systems, depend on budget priorities. In Dominica, we have a lot of water in terms of our number of rivers and the rainfall. So even with that, we are not affected so heavily by droughts. However, one can argue that the distribution of the water and the main water company, the WASCO, and the efficiency in terms of the cost of the delivery of that critical element of water, one can raise question as to whether that is efficient and whether it's fairly distributed in terms of the amount you have to pay, for having that utility at your home. Electricity, we can also say the same. It's very expensive. A great portion of people's income goes towards paying electricity and water as two very, very important utility for survival at home, for lighting, for power, for education and all that stuff. I think it is really, really high. If you compare that, the resources we have in terms of hydro to generate hydroelectricity, and the resources we have in geothermal, and what has been done, and as to how efficient the 100+ million have been spent on geothermal, how efficient that is, and so on. There's a lot of questions that can be raised on those. And finally, national security, which I also put as defense. Security, meaning safety for lives and property, the police force, how efficient it is, how fair and just it is in its deliberation of its responsibilities and its rules and functions. The budget, the allocation of the budget can directly affect those four. So, and we're talking there in more developed countries about armies and defense force, but in Dominica is really about the police department and the judiciary or the judicial system, the courts, the high courts, the magistrate courts, and how long people wait for justice, and the backlog of cases and all that stuff. Budget allocation takes care of that, and how fair the system is, or how free of corruption the system is in fair judgment and so on. So all that is very critical, because if magistrates and judges are not paid competent wages, it opens doors for corruption and bribery and so on and so forth. In umpiring, I did some training in umpiring because I love cricket, and the pay that the elite umpires get has to match, or if not be on par with the corruption that may happen in the game, like match fixing, etc., etc. And it's the same concept with the judicial system. If the magistrates are not getting enough pay to have a good, decent living, then they become vulnerable to bribes and so on. And you will not have fair judgment in the judicial system. So this is just in a nutshell the four areas I choose to speak about to show how important the government budget is to the citizens of a country. So if the budget prioritizes these critical areas, citizens feel positive about the budget, they have a positive outlook, the impact will be positive. If budget doesn't prioritize these areas, then you have a negative impact, and the citizens feel, that they're not properly cared for in the budget allocations. And you cannot blame them, because a large section of the revenue that the government gets comes from the taxes that the citizens pay, the licenses and permits and all that stuff they pay. In the Dominican case, I will have some numbers that we share in a while. We have what we call the Citizen by Investment program, which is bringing in quite a bit of money towards the budget allocation. And one can argue whether that is even efficient, in the sense that whether the use of the CBI money to support recurrent expenditure is even, the best avenue for that resource. It's not like we are a country where we have oil or gold or natural minerals where we can exploit. The Citizen by Investment program is really our cache of oil, if we want to look at it in that perspective. And as to whether we use most of it for just budgetary supplement or complementing the budget for recurrent expenditure, is one that can raise a lot of questions. Whether we should be investing it in bonds and shares that brings back, greater, investments that bring back greater returns, whether we could use those returns to supplement the budget instead of just the capital from the sales of those passports, is another conversation that we can explore. The second area the budget becomes so important is economic stability and growth. In economics, the GDP of the country, which is the gross domestic product, all the value of goods and services produced in a country, has four components. It has consumption, it has investments, it has government spending, and it has the net export import, which are the four areas: trade, the banking system, the government system, and the goods and service system, right? When you bring all this together, you get a total value of the goods and services that a country produces. So if you look at it in just the four areas, already you see the government budget is 25%, if you look at it just from these four sections. But the economies take three types, right? And I'm trying my best to explain it in the simplest term for you. So you have the economic systems. You have the command economy, which is the communist type government style political system. You have the mixed economy, which is somewhere in the middle between the communist and the capitalist, the free market on the right hand side. So you have the right and the left. And somewhere in the middle, you have the mix. And that mixed economy can stretch towards the center right, which is more a capitalist driven type economy, free market. Or you could have one driven towards the left, which is a greater government influence in the economy. In Dominica's case, we have what is almost a far left type economy. It's not mixed in the sense that it's 50-50. It's more like a 80-20, 80 towards the left, towards the communist style type of government, economic style of government, and 20% towards the free market. And I'll explain that with figures in a while. So in the center, it would mean that you have a government that is playing about 50%, contributing about 50% to the total goods and services produced in a country, whereas the free market, the private sector or the business sector is also contributing about 50%. In the figures of the economy in Dominica, from what I could see from the government budget and the GDP, is about 82%. The government currently contributes about 82% of the economy. And I will use just their figures. So the in 2024-25 fiscal year, the budget prior to this year, the government recurrent expenditure was $679.4 million. Their total budget was $1.4 billion. That is both to include the capital and the recurrent, 1.4. That is what they projected to spend last year, right? So if you look at it, the estimated GDP of Dominica is about $1.6 billion, EC, Eastern Caribbean currency. So if you take the projected amount of 1.4 and you divide it by the overall GDP, it means therefore that the government is contributing about 82% of the total economy. Now, that makes it, far left, not extreme, but very far left. It's almost like we're close to what they call a communist state because of the government has so much hands in the overall economy. It also means that we have a very weak private sector, and that has consequences just from looking at the budget figures. Now, if you go a little further and do the analysis, you'll see that even the recurrent expenditure, meaning that the amount of money that the government spends to keep its machinery afloat, the civil service paid, makes up 43% of GDP. So it means that just the government workers through their salaries and income would contribute about 43% of the GDP, just in rare numbers. So their capital expenditure, like some of the projects they have, and people who don't work directly, like salary people, but people who get wages would contribute some more. And the civil service would be just about maybe 12 to 18%. So that means the private sector is very, very, very weak. So therefore, it means that the government budget becomes even more relevant to the citizens of the country because they have so much a big portion that they contribute to that, right? And in so doing, it means that a lot of job creation, the price in the market, all that is dependent on whatever the government budget allocation is and how they spend it. Now, am I saying that being far left is a bad thing? I'm not saying that. Neither I'm saying being far right is a bad thing. I'm saying that again, what I'm saying there is that if the government has so much of a big hand in the economy, it is detrimental that efficiency, accountability, transparency becomes very, very, very important. And in that, I mean that the money allocated for the various sectors of the economy has to bring the highest yield in terms of the implementation and the result that you get from it. So if you're going to spend, let's say, 40 million in education, then you ought to get the best that you can get of the education system. Students doing well at school, students being not just academically driven, but they gain skills, they gain an education that can make them fit into the economic system and contribute to the development of the country. If you put some money in health, it shouldn't be on consultation and all these fees. You should get the best healthcare system you have. People shouldn't be afraid to go to the hospital. People shouldn't be afraid, to go to the primary health care. The secondary healthcare system should be up to grade with medicines and all that stuff. So, but if you have a very large government where the expenditure is not necessarily bringing back efficiency, but just to keep supporters and voters happy, then you will have a system of healthcare and education that is deteriorating, but the expenditure is still very high. And that we can also explore that and look at actual numbers versus performances in that section.
Yeah.
Now, job creation.
Sanford, just before you go to the job creation aspect, Josh is there. He said boldly he will assist you in some regard. Josh, anything that Brother Sanford said so far that you want to chime in on or add to it in terms of your own suggestions?
Yes, Josh, can you hear us? I think he froze. Josh.
All right, Claudius, continue. Something is wrong with Josh. We'll try to rectify that. Yeah, go ahead, Sanford.
Right. So job creation. So again, as I said, in our context, we're looking at the actual figures, and we'll come to that, I guess, in our discussion later. The actual figures show that the government really contributes about 88%, between 82 and 88%. I actually do a calculation that it shows 88% based on the figures, but it ranges between 82 and 88%. Now, that means that the government would be responsible for a lot of the employment in the country. And we see that, when we look at the private sector in Dominica, it's only maybe Roseau have a little commercial activity with the private sector. Like almost 95% of the private sector is located in Roseau. And if you look at the countryside, you look at Marigot and the Portsmouth, the Salisbury's, La Plains, the Castle Bruce, not so much large-scale private sector operations happen there to create a lot of jobs. I mean, you can actually maybe count them on one or two hands in those areas, the private sector jobs, you know, the self-employed jobs, you know, the little shops, etc., etc. The farmers, all that has decreased rapidly or significantly over the last 2 decades. Huckster operation, you had before the banana industry that supported a lot of, you know, small enterprises at the country level in terms of transportation, and, you know, all the other little jobs. This is gone. The huckstering trade has not really picked up. To you have a logistic framework of, you know, farm to market or farm to table, where you have, you know, transportation companies, you have, you know, manufacturing value added companies along that line. So these things are missing. So the private sector is really dominated by the shelf industry, as I said. You know, people buying things from abroad, resell it with a markup and so on, and then, you know, the port being, you know, the cash cow of the country or the government, where, you know, taxes and more taxes are being added, and we will see that in the budget, you know, with the environmental levy and all this stuff. All these things happen in the port now, where the exchange of goods and services, which are the imported goods and services, that becomes the cash cow of the government, and also the tax revenues through VAT, which is again another second layer which is added to the imported goods, and we can see how that is not, you know, very stable. So one can say that, you know, the government spending on projects like roads or renewable energy creates jobs, and it could also indicate why you have a lot of our young people, educated young people, migrating out of the country, because the government cannot do it all, and some of the areas that they study with their degrees, the government really cannot absorb them. And as such, you see, you know, large brain drain, a large, you know, outward migration of our skilled people. You know, so that in itself shows the correlation or the relationship between that.
But,
Price stability is
but
another one.
tell me, before you go to price stability, and I know we have unpacked quite a bit so far,
Mhm.
in terms, and I know you're bringing it into some sort of logical conclusion, or sort of logical framework, but in terms of where you sit now, and knowing what you know of the economy back home, no jobs, garbage, as I say, problem, health problem, education problem. I mean, agriculture not where it is, manufacturing weak, with private sector. Would you say in all of that, the budget does not adequately address the needs of the people?
Well, to answer this one, you have to look at it. As I said, I introduced the private sector, I introduced the government sector, and clearly we have a dominated government sector economy, far left, right? So to create jobs in the economy, the government would now have to diversify its portfolios within the government system. And plainly, if you want to say that word logically, the government is not a for-profit driven entity, right? And it's going to be hard to diversify into productive areas in the government, because to get into the productive areas, one would have to be driven for profits. So what we see is over the 2 decades, as the government pushes further left, more towards a communist state, they almost totally take control of what we produce, how we produce it, where we produce it. And because they cannot cross so far into the profit generating aspect of it, their hands become tied to a certain limit. And that is why I would say, from that perspective, they have exhausted what they could do in terms of job creation. Now, it would have to take a rethinking where they have reached a maximum, but now they have to strengthen the private sector. Now, strengthening the private sector means you have to go in to look at the industries, the agriculture industry, the tourism industry, and allow the operating private sector enterprises there to expand, to create the jobs that the citizens would get, because they would be profit driven, they would be efficiency driven, they would be technologically driven, and all that goes with the private sector. The current government, in its ideological positioning, seems averse to that. They don't seem to be encouraging the private sector, because the private sector is wealth generation. And for somehow, if you really analyze the government operation over the last 2 decades, they seem to be very comfortable in having the people dependent on them. So you have the NEP program, you have the SWK program, and so on. And nothing has been put in place. For example, the farmers over the last 20 years have not evolved to an area where they can be self-sustainable, in the sense that there's a scheme where they can pay into a retirement scheme and they can gain some money from their hard work. So that has not materialized. So then they have to fall back on the government, the SWK program, or the purpose allowance and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Even in healthcare, there haven't been.
Sanford, not tripping you. I think we have Josh back. Josh, can you hear us now?
Yes, Lofty.
Okay.
All right. Josh, thank you for, doing what you did in the back to sort of be back with us. Josh, Brother Sanford basically laid down a ton of stuff there in terms of information for us.
Yes.
You have been listening. Now is your time, Josh, to sort of chime in some of what you heard, compliment, whatever it is, your thoughts based on what you heard.
Well, thank you. First of all, let me apologize for my absence over the past few minutes. That's really not my doing. It has everything to do with my service provider. Unfortunately, unlike the United States, I cannot, institute a lawsuit. But let me commend Sanford. I almost said Dr. Sanford, because when you listen to him in economics, you're almost ready to put that doctorate on him. And I'm sure we heard quite a lot. But for our listeners, I'm going to just add to what Sanford said. I'm not too sure how much I can add, but why is that budget so important? Well, you heard Sanford. Why is that so important? It is that important because we have a government, a group of people who were assigned with a responsibility to manage our resources. And resources are scarce, especially in a small developing country like Dominica, a population of less than 70,000 people, a population that has found economic opportunities and financial opportunities to be very limited. And this government has the responsibility to manage the scarce, limited resources we have for the benefit of every citizen. And like everywhere else in the world, citizens are interested in buying. We refer to us as consumers, and we prefer more than less. More we get is better for us. That's just the way our economic brain works. And as Sanford said, that budget is important because it gives us an estimate for a fiscal year, usually 1 year, as to how this government is going to raise money and spend money to make our lives better. Hence the reason why the citizens must be engaged. And everything Sanford said, one of the things that has stood out is the importance of the private sector. And I took some notes when Sanford was saying that about 80% of government expenditure makes up the national income, the gross domestic product of Dominica. And maybe we can spend some time on that later on. He attempted to say why that is important. Why is that relevant? Why is it that maybe Dominica's economy has not skyrocketed? Why it hasn't really moved as quickly as our neighbors? Maybe it's because this government has, done too little to grow our private sector. And as Sanford put it right, the private sector is profit driven. They are entrepreneurs. They want to make a profit. And where you find profit driven businesses, you find more efficiency, more productivity, higher salaries. And that is another problem in Dominica. We have not been able to realize as high salaries as in St. Kitts or St. Lucia because they have a larger, more buoyant private sector, people who are in the business to make profits. And in so doing, they're more efficient, they're more productive, and you find more exports. You also find more foreign direct investment, something that Sanford may want to comment on later. So I just want to say, and for our listeners, the budget is something that is very important. And surprisingly, in all my life, just over 50 years, this year to me was the least public participation in a budget address. You could not feel it. I mean, up to last year before, you would go on social media platforms, you would see something about the budget. This year, whilst Dr. McIntyre was giving the presentation, I happened to go on Facebook to see what was happening, and it's like there was no traffic. Nobody seemed to care. Nobody, no discussions in the rum shops, no discussions in the Roseau. So I'm hoping those types of engagement, which is happening right now, can get the public to understand that a budget is very, very important. And, we can have Sanford and other people like him go out there and explain to the people why a budget is important. So really, I do not want to stop.
Josh, having said that, though, do you think that, for example, the government should be able to engage or should have engaged or should be in the process of engaging the citizenry even before these budget presentations?
Well, a responsible government would want to do that. And also a responsible nation would want its government to have that kind of engagement. So it goes both ways. Leadership is everything. So sometimes you may find a nation asleep or in slumber, but a visionary leader will take the responsibility to do something like that, to go out on the field and explain to people what we are going to present in the budget. Why is the budget important? How is it going to impact your life? So I would say in the affirmative, yes, we need to do more of that, because at the end of the day, the budget is not for the prime minister and his ministers. It's really supposed to be for the nation, the public, everybody, because everybody is impacted by the management of the government, management of our resources by the government. And I just want to, there are several areas where Sanford pointed out. He spoke about accountability and transparency, and he spoke about the CBI. Now, why is that important? Again, the budget reflects the responsibility and accountability of the government in respect to our resources, because we are looking at public goods. For example, we have had this situation where we question the government in regards to revenues generated from the CBI program. The government has not been allocated or has not been given us the full disclosure on revenues generated from the CBI, because according to them, there's a special project, and basically what they have done is to remove certain estimates from the consolidated funds on the basis that these revenues are for special projects. So that is something that we have to keep in mind, that a budget also gives us the level of accountability of a government, the transparency level. What is this government presenting? How is it going to raise the funds? What is it doing with the funds? So that too is very important.
So as we go back to Sanford, thanks Josh for that intervention. As we go back to Claudius, I take note of two things you mentioned there. One, I think earlier in your submission, your comments, you seem to suggest that the government has run out of ideas. And secondly, you talk about the pull or the push more towards a communist type system. So with against that background, what kind of impact, of course you mentioned the areas that you did, but what kind of impact you think that's going to have on the people or the citizens of the country?
Well, if I can come in there, first of all, you will find that in that well, you said that they run out of ideas, but I think it's a strategy, right? I might be wrong, and some people might maybe challenge me on that or share their views on that. It would be really nice. But I think it's a strategy to keep the people at a certain level of wealth. And if you look at Dominica, there are a few people who are very wealthy, and these are the political elites, and they are really close to the political organization or the political party in government. And I don't think it's a running out. I think it's a strategic move, and the people have not been awakened to that. And I'm hoping those kind of discussions will awaken people to that, because the government so positioned itself that it manages the oil of the country, which is the CBI program, and it has distributed it among an elite, political elite class that is using that, so that strategy work because they become the influencers to the poor people when they can go now in the communities with some envelopes and drop in a poor man hand, and a man will vote for $500 because to him that's a lot of money. And you see, even now, I mean, first time I have seen that in my little life, like Josh. I'm not so far from Josh in telling him, but when I grew up a little boy, teachers and policemen and doctors and nurses were big people in the community. They built their own homes. They were the one of the little businesses. Right now, teachers are lining up to get homes distributed to, for the government system. They're lining up to, to get the little duty frees and all that stuff. And it shows that the government in their strategy has been able to disseminate the middle class. So there's the elites, the political elites who have access to the state resources, which is the CBI, the passport sales. And then you have a large lower class, which is the poor people, and at the top, just at the top of that class are the civil servants. Now, doctors and so on and lawyers, now they have to hustle the private practice a lot to differentiate from the lower class in a little way. So the doctors have to start their private businesses and see how they can do there, and still do a lot of gratuitous work for free, help people from the communities, and they give them the little that they can give them. So clearly, I think it's a strategy to keep the people at a certain level of wealth so that they can have that control over the people through the voting system. If you expand the private sector, as we just said, and just kind of commented on that, is that you are profit driven, you're production driven, you're efficiency driven. People will build wealth, you get better pay. There will be an explosion of innovation and research and development. Have you seen anything over the last 20 years in the government up in our research and development institutions in Dominica? We still have to send a few things to Trinidad to be tested and so on and so forth. So we cannot develop our products here in ways and creative ways. We still have to depend on foreign technology, consultancy. And if you look at the government expenditure on consultancy, like they are not empowering our own people. It's like you have people who are trained and skilled in certain areas and they're overlooked. Look at the construction sector in Dominica. I mean, who built all the roads in Dominica prior to this government? The Dominicans, right? Now you see a little health center is being built, a little wing is being built in a school in Dominica is foreigners. And you ask yourself, but where's the exchange of technology? Where's the growth in our entrepreneurs, in our engineers, in our business people? So it's not out of ideas. I think it's a calculated strategy, and I believe it has worked for them. But I really hope that the people will start opening up their eyes to the strategy.
We're coming up to the hour in a few before we take the break, and I guess when we come back. So I think if I may input in what you just said, that strategy is reflected in the budget. In the way the budget is presented, that strategy is built in the budget.
For sure. Because when a government will take 3 hours to repeat that some goods are VAT exempted, and to repeat that list 5 times in their budget presentation, rice, canned corned beef, and you have the guy leaning on a side so tired and weak, repeating that canned corned beef is tax exempt.
I like that.
The strategy is there because he's saying he's appealing to the minimal need of the people. Absolutely. In the Maslow hierarchy of needs, like your basic needs: food, clothing, and shelter. Absolutely. And nothing to talk about no serious investment in any industry to bring some economic growth and so on. So they're just trying to fight a little bit of the inflation, to cut down a little bit of the prices by 15%, and they repeat that 5 to 6 times in the budget. So it's clear to see that the strategy is there. If they were consulting, they would have ideas how to build the economy. And if you really listen closely, Thompson Fountain presented the 10 pillars of economic growth in the country that the AWP will take, if we're given the opportunity to run the country. And they just try to copy that. They were so lazy in doing that, they didn't even change the theme. Prosperity for all. Shared prosperity. They actually use that verbatim, which is, again, plagiarism. So you see how it is they're not willing to go in and work and look for anything creative or innovative to build the economy. It's just around the same thing. They brought back the road tax.
Yeah.
I mean, something that you had, you took it out and you're bringing it back. I mean, how lazy can that be? Like, you couldn't even look for a new avenue to make revenue for the country. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
Transport and gentlemen, quickly, I guess we'll get an opportunity to massage or to speak on certain items from the budget presentation, one of which is the presentation that the government, in partnership with a company, will or has purchased the brewery at Loubier. That is Kubuli beer and Loubier water. And the minister spoke about their vision to export water internationally. Now, I want us to spend some time on that because that's very interesting. And it shows you, as Claudia says, how lazy and deceptive this government is and not really thinking. I mean, everybody here travels. And even before the demise of Loubier Water Factory, you can attest that you rarely saw a Loubier water on the shelf in St. Lucia, in St. Vincent, in Barbados, in Antigua. Now, I want to understand how this government would purchase the Loubier Water Factory and get to a point where it's going to export Loubier water to Europe. Because I think that's what I heard from the minister. So I want us to spend some time on that. And maybe Claudius can explain from an economic point of view as to how plausible that is, given the high cost of production in Dominica. Because production of water and beers, to some extent, is technically oriented and technically intensive. And that takes electricity. And we know how, the cost of electricity is high in this country. I'm not too sure geothermal will necessarily salvage us in the very near future. So I'm just trying to understand how is that going to happen. I mean, it's good to hear that the government has finally realized that we need factories, we need to produce, we need to export. So that's a plus in respect to that limb in the budget presentation, because Claudius makes the point. This is a government that has focused more on making people dependent. This government has spent very, very little time in creating an enabling environment to see the private sector grow. This government seems not to focus on foreign direct investment. I saw there's mention of 1 or 2 tax incentives to encourage the growth of the private sector, but 6-month tax break. I mean, what are they thinking? How is that necessarily going to cause a man who is looking into the Caribbean, wants to invest his millions of dollars? He looks into the infrastructure in Dominica, he looks into the political climate, and be encouraged to come here to do business. So those are the type of things, probably we can, comment on as to how serious this government is in making Dominica a better place.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Well, it seems to me that we are doing today part 1, and we definitely need a part 2, because there's going to be a lot more to unpack, quite frankly. But go ahead, Sanford. You wanted to say?
All right.
Josh brought the idea of the
Sanford, 1 minute, sir. 1 minute. Just give me 1 minute. We're gonna take that all important break at this time because we're way past that time a little. Then when you come back, we will sort of get you to chime in. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. The poor man I feel it, huh?
The poor man I feel it.
Said the man Peter Tosh sometime back. And so if you're tuning in at this time, we're talking to attorney at law and economist, Brother Joshua Francis, and also economist, Brother Claudius Sanford out of Dominica. We're discussing the whole importance of a budget to a country on the heels of the just concluded budget presentation last Friday.
That to be a solution. solution to this pollution. Yeah.
So yes, folks, if you want to contribute to the program, the numbers on your screen, these are the numbers to call into the program, just in case you want to contribute, huh?
Whoa, 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 whoa. Gotta find a solution to this pollution.
Also, those of you in the live feed, if your comments, Alvin and myself will be throwing them at our guests in just a bit.
The poor man of me.
So please keep them coming indeed. Thank you very much for your eyes and ears each and every time.
I know. Only him feels, yeah. Time gone up, skeleton gone up.
So my brother in Zimbabwe, you're listening, you're locked. Good evening to you.
Black pepper gone up,
Or should I say good morning rather?
and the parents them angry, cause the baby them hungry, and there has got to be a solution to this your pollution.
So to my brother in Zimbabwe listening at this time,
Find a solution to this pollution. Promises won't help. You got to find a solution to this pollution. With
says Lofty, good conversation so far from these two guests.
this pollution, only the poor man of
He
peace.
said he's loving what he's hearing so far. Read this Commonwealth country called Dominica.
My feelings go on.
Lots of parallel to them in Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Only in my feelings go on.
Yes, folks, it's the poor man. Yes, the very poor man who will feel it each and every time indeed.
The poor man of peace.
So that is why we're discussing the budget this evening. Why it is important to us as the citizens of this country and all other democratic countries.
The poor man of peace.
Much food for thought so far from our two guests here, Brother Francis and Brother Sanford indeed.
Yeah.
Let's get back now to the live conversation with our brothers here. Brother Sanford, you were saying something before the break.
Yeah, so Joshi spoke about the point he made before we went off, and I was saying that it is very clear, that the suggestions that the government made as it relates to the water and so is a response to one of the 10 pillars from Dr. Fountain's presentation. Because we talk in that presentation, he spoke about the water industry and how we can do, and you can see it was like a knee-jerk reaction. Because again, why is it that the government always feel that they must have a hand in those sectors? It's like, this has to be private sector driven, provide the environment, as Josh said, provide the tax-free, the duty-free, push the geothermal to get cheaper electricity, these are the kind of engagement the government, but they still want to have a share in the business aspect of it, to be the one producing those goods and services. And that is where the problem is. And Josh brought it up nicely that when you have a government hand so deep in the production aspect of the economy, foreign investors going to see that early hours. Some of these guys out there, they don't want to have a government so deep in their operation in their business. They want to know that they can make decisions to ensure efficiency, to ensure, how they call that, economies of scale and competitiveness in prices. And the government would be there with other political aspiration and political objectives, want to employ free for more people because that's a vote they can get. And so the foreign investors, once they see that, that's not an attraction. You understand? They want to know they can operate within the regulations. Of course, that's the role of the government. Environmental protection, labor laws and all this good stuff, but not to be a stakeholder, an actual member of the productive process. So foreign investors are not going to be attracted to that kind of stuff. I just wanted to point that out there, as Josh made reference
But
to.
you see, as you rightly pointed out earlier, Claudius, That is the strategy. Claudius, that is the strategy.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So it's not that they're out of ideas, it's just that their ideas is not to allow the private sector to grow so far that they lose control of the votes, which is so this government is a political party merged into or submerged into the governance of the country. And the objectives are really politically driven. And this is not good for the private sector, because the private sector is, as I said, profit driven, efficiency driven, and wealth driven. And once the government want to have it hand too deep in it, the private sector is going to suffer.
Yeah.
And sorry, I was just about to highlight a point from one of the assertions of Dr. McIntyre in the budget presentations. If I'm allowed in quote, he said, as we speak, 41 companies are benefiting from a range of concession packages. These include exemptions on import duties for hotel supplies, operational equipment, vehicles, and raw materials. Qualifying businesses also enjoy a tax holiday on eligible expenditure and VAT waivers on capital imports until operations commence. Over the last 18 months, the government has granted concessions packages to 21 businesses. In quote, he said, adding that their proposed investments over the next 2 years total approximately EC $79.5 million and are expected to create 242 permanent jobs and generate additional short-term employment. Now, that's very interesting here. I'm not too sure whether you're aware as to which, if any, of these companies that are in the startup process and will create those job opportunities as stated by the Minister of Finance. Well, I don't know if you can help me. What kind of businesses? What are they involved in? Is it only for local consumption? Are they going to be involved in exports? You know, those are the kinds of questions that one would ask. I realize he made no mention as to what sector these businesses are involved in, what type, what's the nature of their business, whether they will be exporting, whether it is just for local consumption. Just interesting questions.
Very interesting, Joshua. And you made the point earlier of the deceptiveness of this government and the way they present stuff, right? You'd notice that even with there's not much figures. I searched before this presentation for the actual revenue collected from the last fiscal year, you know, because you may have, and that is the thing I want people to understand as well. The government may project a budget of $1.4 billion to spend, but the actual expenditure that they do, based on the information I have, is about 72% of that. So they would give those big figures, and clearly there's an indication, because the last big budget there was 2019. We had an election, and now they went up to 1.4 billion. Is the second, the highest one ever, past the 2019 one. So there's an election in the air. It's clear. It's quite clear, right? So the idea is give those big numbers, but in actuality, what they spend is way less, 72%. So if you take 72% of the 1.4 billion, close to maybe 700-800 million that they will spend, but they give the impression that they're going to spend a lot. So it could be that is being said there in such a deceptive way that it's nowhere to be seen. But if I'm saying it there and I'm putting it in the 1.4 billion, then I don't spend it. I could go back to my recurrent expenditure, which is the government operations and the few other little things that I do. But it is good politics to say those things. And that is why they couldn't be very specific. And that is why it's so important, as you said, Josh, earlier, that people have to listen. You know, people, I think the Dominican public is too distracted, and they not focus on what is so important, like this budgeting. Because if you look at, you know, I saw somebody said on social media that it's just copy and paste. It's like, if you listen to last year's budget and the figures and the year before and the year before, you see a whole a repetition of stuff that never happens. For example, the Rosso improvement budget from the Saudis or whatever. You see that has been there in several, and nothing has been done. The Dominica State College, there have been 2.5 million budgeted for the repair of the college from since 2017. 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 25, and it is just been repeated, but nothing has been done.
Brother Sanford, very succinct points here. We have someone on the line. I've been holding for some time. You'll get back to some of these unfulfilled promises as it were. Let's try and facilitate this caller. Caller, yes, good evening, Civic Vibes, you're on.
Good evening, Lofty, and to your panelists, everyone, and your listenership. I'd like to first just address what Josh just spoke of in relation to the businesses that supposedly will create new jobs and getting certain concessions. If we look into that, we might find that many of these supposed businesses may be businesses that belong to persons who support the government or who are benefiting from the supposed investments in hotels and so on through CBI. Many of them are supporters of the party, members of the party, and even ex-ministers of government, or even Speaker of the House, and so on. So really, there's no substance in that, in my view. Secondly, in relation to the buying of the Lubia water, I cannot understand why it is that we have a water company that bottles water, Twapito, I believe it is, and the government would spend the money. It would be interesting to find out how much they've spent, but spend money on buying a shell, a waste of a production plant that was virtually totally destroyed by weather events, and is now proposing to turn that around and make it into a productive plant again. Why not assist the company that is already bottling water to market and to increase their production, so that the private sector can grow and provide the jobs that are necessary. And the last thing I would like to totally and absolutely agree with Sanford when he says that this is all a strategy. And it really upsets and angers me when I hear people say that these guys have run out of ideas. And if you say they don't understand economics, I can probably agree with that. But when you say they have run out of ideas, no. The fact is that the ideas that they have and they put into place are ideas that are benefiting them personally or benefiting the political party that they lead, and the benefit to the country is of no consequence or no importance to them whatsoever. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, Colin. Thank you very much for your three very succinct points raised here. Josh, you want to take one of the points in terms of the purchase of this water company, Shell, as the caller mentioned it. You raised it earlier.
Yes, I'm from the Lubia area, so I have an idea of the extent of the damage that had been done to that facility. I'm no engineer, but by just looking at the facility, I know it's going to take a significant amount of money and reconstruction for that plant to become alive again. But Claudius highlighted an important point. A visionary government, a government that is serious about people's development, would look to encourage persons within the private sector to undertake such an enterprise, create the enabling environment. We talk about tax concessions and creating incentives, whatever, to get someone to undertake such a project if he or she so decides. But when the government says that it's going to get involved, it's going into partnership, once again, it is supporting the point that Claudius has highlighted over the course of the night, that this government wants to be in charge, it wants to be in control. And any government that wants to be in charge or in control will stagnate the growth and development of a country, because governments are attached or associated with a lack of efficiency, with corruption, a lack of transparency, as we have seen in this country, and a lack of accountability. So it's a good initiative. It's a good idea in terms of revitalizing the water plants. But I would like to see a report on that. Again, that is where the government has become very shallow, because the minister comes out in his budget address to make such a comment. We had not heard of that before. A responsible government would have several discussions on this subject and provide a roadmap as to how plausible such an initiative would be. Number one, who is the partner? That is what a transparent government does. Number two, they would have done a proper cost-benefit analysis on the plant. This is how much it's going to cost to resuscitate this plant, and this is how much money we can make over a period of time. These are the number of jobs we can create. That is how you do things. That is how you see it in democracies. I mean, we look at TV, we go on social media platforms, we see economic programs, we see how they are discussed. Here in our parts, a minister comes into parliament, he gives his budget presentation, he disappears until the next year. Because from there, it's just fanfare and politics. There's nothing tangible, nothing serious. I mean, listen to Claudius. It's chalk and cheese when you put these guys in parliament representing the government, explaining what's supposed to be a budget. Let's listen over the next few days, and you look at the quality, the standard. You'll more find, upper cuts and lower cuts being given to members of the opposition, as opposed to having substantial conversations which can enlighten the nation and elevate the discussion and bring betterment to the people. So I would say the idea of the water plant coming back in the fall, it's a great one. But as to whether this government is serious, I doubt it. And the way in which this government wants to do it, I don't like it.
And what about the suggestion now, Brother Josh, by the caller that says, why not, at least in the first instance, help out Tuapita Water that is already in the bottling business?
Well, I would say that this government has failed to bring our local entrepreneurs under one roof and have a discussion to see how are they doing. Look at their books and say, look, we have had a lot of revenue from the CBI program. We get foreigners to come here to build hotels. We give our friends the money to build hotels. You're running a business. How has it been? How is it going? Do you need an injection? How much do you need? I mean, we can say that for Garaway. We can say that, for Evergreen, all these little indigenous hotels. They're on the wayside. Is government interested in helping them? No, the people, if you look at who is building these new hotels, you can see it's players and actors of the Dominica Labour Party. They're friends. And some of that money is going right back into these ministers' pocket. And that is sad. I mean, you see conflict of interest laced all over Dominica. And then when the caller made his point, Lofty, I saw he was going to say that some of these companies may very well be companies of some of these ministers. Because we're hearing allegations that these guys own companies which are being fronted by relatives and friends. So that's what's happening here. So I think it's a good idea that the government would sit with entrepreneurs, local businesses, and people with ideas, because there are quite a number of Dominicans who have had business ideas, but those business ideas cannot take off because they do not have the initial capital. So I believe that one of these ministers within the economic area could be assigned the responsibility to meet with these potential entrepreneurs, meet with the existing businessmen, and see how they can get things going and expand like Tuapita. I mean, you talk about getting water, out of the region, extraterritorial borders. So why not have a conversation with Tuapita entrepreneurs, proprietors, and see how the government can help?
Yeah, folks, at 7:30, that's the bottom of the hour. We're going to take some comments from the live feed. So Alvin, please take note of some of the comments here. But yes, Claudius, you want to chime in?
Yeah, for sure, Lofty. I totally agree with the caller, and I think Josh has articulated well on that. I mean, why haven't the government call in, Tuapita and look to expand the production? In so doing, you'll have maybe a cheaper domestic price. Find ways to bring in larger containers, or so you have economies of scales, because that is where the cost of the water is in the bottling material, the plastic bottling material. So we can find ways to have a larger, contingent of the material at a cheaper rate. You get economies of scale there. So these are the kind of conversation to be had. But just to have a knee-jerk reaction to a proposition from an alternative political party and try to give it some shell to deceive the people, I don't think that is caught in it. And I'm really hoping that the people, are awake and listening and seeing through this deception, Why not? Yeah, I agree with the caller. Why not expand Capita and go into some innovative way? I'm pretty sure the management and operation of Capita can instruct that kind of partnership and for the greater good of the country and the economy.
Yeah. Earlier on in your submission, Claudius, you mentioned the sort of the structure of a budget in terms of revenue, recurrent revenue, expenditure, and all that good stuff. Now, I personally haven't looked deep into what was just presented. However, from the information I have suggests that out of that 1.2 or 1 point whatever billion dollars, 443.9 million is going to be tax revenue, and 635 million is going to be CBI. So again, using the example that you give with the home, it's like someone working their full-time job, they're being paid so much an hour, regular rate, they're full-time. But occasionally they'll do a little overtime. Occasionally they'll do a little odd job there. But they tend to be depending more on the overtime for their overall management of their house and their budget. Because if we say the CBI is not a sustainable way of raising revenue, and we are putting 57.5% of whatever our total revenue is as CBI monies to run the country, to provide the services, to provide all the infrastructure. How do you speak to that?
And I raised it earlier, Alvin, when I presented, is that is a conversation as Dominicans we need to have, because what we see here is that on one hand, or one side of the mouth, the government is saying, hey, the CBI is under challenge, we're facing challenge, revenues are dropping, but they still have, on the other side, putting there in the estimates that this is what's going to fund most of the operation. And I think this government has really exploited the CBI program. They have benefited the greatest from it, but the results are not showing, And I think it's about time we have a conversation about how do we really utilize the CBI revenue? Should it be, so predominantly used in budget, supplementing the budget, or should we find ways to really invest this money in a more diverse way so that it can be longer serving for the citizens of the country, the future of the country? Because the way it's going there, the future generation, our children or grandchildren, not going to see the benefits of an asset of state that they possess, they should benefit from that in altruistically, like in the future. They should have a benefit. But this government over the last 2 decades have ripped in all this money, and there's nothing to show. Because first of all, most of the hotel business that I've gone into haven't really produced the result that they want. You see a lot of the white elephants, starting with the Layu River Hotel, right down to the Portsmouth thing, and all this that they continue. It's like it's really, really a laundry machine. We are not investing, we are not diversifying the revenues from that CBI program. And the little that is left, they put actually 760 million, 414 from tax revenues, 28 from others like certificates and licenses and so on. And 760, which is 57% or more of what they projected will come from CBI. So again, the deception is there. We know that is not going to materialize. So clearly we know the 1.4 billion is not going to materialize. But it's an election year, and they're putting those big figures to raise the hope of the people. And Josh,
But Claudius,
you say Claudius, it's an election year, Claudius. That's what you said.
Yeah. But Lofty.
Josh, just before we take you, we have the line is lighting up. Let me just facilitate that call and you'll come in. Caller, yes, good evening.
Yeah, gentlemen, sorry for calling again. I wish more people would call, but I must speak. I would like the gentlemen here who are trained economists to address this particular issue. The use of CBI funds that we all agree is unsustainable long term, could run out at any time. the use of these funds to build apartments to give persons without title for free, and by so doing, not increasing their portfolio, not assisting them to own property or land, but instead having them dependent on you for them to have somewhere to live. And I would like you all to address that firstly, and secondly, how is that going to affect us as a people long term when we consider the fact that these properties will continue to be owned by government, and so will have to be maintained by government long term? Are we going to end up with slums at the end of the day because the government is either unable or unwilling to pay monies to maintain those properties? Or would it have been a lot better for government to have assisted those persons in somehow having their own properties that they would be able to maintain over time? Thank you again.
All right, caller. Thank you very much. The guests here, they will find some time to deliberate. But Josh, yes, continue. Thank you, caller.
Yes, I was just making the observation. As you know, over the years, members of the opposition have raised questions about accountability of CBI funds. So in these estimates, I was asking whether there is any provision for revenues which will be generated by MMCE. Remember, the Prime Minister several years ago indicated that not all the funds will be reported in the consolidated funds because some of them were diverted under special project, such as for the construction of the international airport. So I'm just raising that to say that we must keep our eyes open and take note of what really is happening with the CBI program, because of course, Mr. Linton was the main individual continually raising that issue. And I would not want the issue to die, and therefore I am just asking the question. I'm not too sure whether Sanford has taken note of that as far as the estimates from the CBI program, whether it's making any provisions at all for revenues generated under the CBI program for the construction of the international airport.
Well, so what I would say, Josh, I would say it may have been captured under the capital expenditure section, because you could say that the international airport is a capital project, so they may have merged it there, not separated. Maybe you would have to read further, in the presentation or even in the estimates to get further knowledge of that. But these numbers are not yet available. I try looking up for the estimates to actually look at the actual revenue generated from last year's budget to see how far the estimate would be this year from the last year budget, because that again, and I had something to talk about the balanced budget approach in developing countries, which I may get to a little later, but those figures are still not available, and that again is another area that should be of concern to Dominicans. This government has hidden information. They have made it their mantra in keeping critical information away from the public, so that even and they have done it with the opposition in the past, they still do it. So they give you 1 day, 2 days to prepare to come in, and they give you a little bit of information, so you cannot really do a critical analysis of the budget and present in a rebuttal. But all these are again the strategy of a government that want to control all the aspects of the people or the citizens in the country, and so doing, they have driven the people interest in the budget and in that kind of information. So the conversation that Dominicans should be having as to the importance of the budget is also being diluted, and very few of us who has that intrinsic interest in that would be the ones studying, and that is not enough voices. And again, I call on the journalists here. I mean, although Lofty will not carry the coat as a journalist, but he's doing his part and he is having that conversation now. But what are the journalists in Dominica doing? There are certain critical questions that has to be asked to the government, and nobody is doing that. The government is running a political show with the journalists in Dominica. DBS Radio, Kyrie FM, even Q95. We don't have journalists that have the aptitude to do the necessary research, do the digging, and come up with those relevant questions. And I think there's a huge gap that has to be filled in the journalist field in Dominica, in the information field in Dominica, so that people can hear, more important stuff as it relates to the livelihood, which is the economy of Dominica.
No, you're right, Claudius. You're absolutely right. I mean, if you take, for example, the airport project, which is one of the biggest projects Dominica has ever undertaken, that should be a line item specific in the budget. So there should be a line item saying that the airport is going to cost 2.3 million or 4 million or whatever the case might be. And as such, we have spent 100,000 right now. We got another 80,000 to spend. And this is where it is. And all that information should be made available. Because even in this current statement from the Minister of Finance, he's saying that the 635 million that's going to come from CBI is to support the international airport. But up until now, as far as information, budget information, like you said, I haven't seen anywhere a line item saying, well, okay, the airport overall cost is going to cost 10 million. And so far we have spent 5 million. And that, as we said, is irresponsible. There's no legislative oversight, no civil monitoring, no access of information, no independent audit. Not all of that are areas that should be taken into account in the budget. And that's why I said Civic Vibes is doing that program, and we definitely will, from where the conversation is going, I suspect we want to do a part 2, because we don't want to just leave it hanging. We want to really take it to its conclusion in the absence of the other persons or institutions not doing the work. Unfortunately, you and I, Josh, Claudius, Lofty, Civic Vibes, we have to do it.
Yeah. All right, Alvin, thank you very much for your very succinct point here. I must say, let us now focus, folks, our attention to some of our viewers or listeners. They are here with us. They're keeping us company, as it were. To take some of the comments and punch it at our guests here. Guvel Mahambrin is asking an all-important question here. That person writes, do we have an agency or department where investors, big or small, can apply for concessions and not go to a politician, as it were, who will decide based on their political affiliation? That is a question. And that person's comment after says one should be able to apply to a department, and there should be a framework in place to decide the level of concessions that can be have based on the amount of investment. So Josh, Josh, you're there?
Yes, I am.
Yes,
I am here.
I thought you had slipped off the radar.
Yes.
Do you know if there's any such agency or department?
Yeah, we do have a legal framework, and we do have an office. I think that's in the Ministry of Finance. So whoever is interested in obtaining concessions for a business should be able to go to the Ministry of Finance and find the right officer, get the forms, fill it in. But ultimately, those have to be approved by the PS and or some other government official. And you know how it is. It gets political.
Yeah.
I mean, Lofty, just before we move on to the next question, I mean, we just had an example last week with Dr. Dangleben. You heard a testimony from Dr. Dangleben in respect to the challenges that he had in getting certain medical supplies into Dominica. He sought duty-free concessions, and he was sent to travel all around the world just to come back to be denied. Even if the container which he was trying to get into Dominica, subject to certain duty-free concessions, had items for the Dominica China Friendship Hospital. So in not even philanthropy, he was able to obtain concessions, and our suspicion is because of politics.
Yeah, we will try our very best to get Dr. Dangleben on sometime in the future to sort of, give some flesh to those bones that we have been, as we were hearing in the public.
But Lofty, before you go to the next point, you ask a question that is very, very significant. And Joshi made the point that there is a legal aspect to that, right? So I believe Dominicans too, we have allowed that political play in that aspect of our governance, because a duty-free concession on a business looking to expand to something, there should be, and in law it caters, therefore in law there is no need to walk up the steps to sit and ask a minister for a favor.
Yeah.
We are protected by that in the law.
Mhm.
And I believe it's about time that a citizen of the country make an example of the government. Like if you're denied duty free, there is the legal framework to challenge that in court and put the government to account. And I believe because we have failed to do that over the time, and we have gone along with the play of going and sit down with the prime minister and ask him for a duty free on a vehicle and explain all our business idea to him, and he will, use the opportunity to try to win us over to his political side. I think we have allowed that as a people, and I believe it's about time that a citizen challenged that in court, because the legal framework is there, as Joshi said, and maybe that is an area that Civic Vibes could explore with the lawyers as well. Get them to come in and explain that, because there are grounds to challenge the government on some of their actions. And bear in mind, I am beginning to see a trend that because it is becoming, the government, especially the prime minister, is becoming so comfortable with those actions and these risky actions that he is becoming more empowered to do even more.
Emboldened
To do more. And I believe it's about time that the citizens of this country challenge these guys in the court, even if not in Dominica, take it elsewhere and challenge these guys. And I think the idea of the CBI money in the special accounts is being challenged. That is the way we have to go with this government.
That's the road.
They are being emboldened. If they try something, it work, and they keep going, expanding. They give them an inch, they take a mile kind of stuff.
Yes,
and the citizenry has to rise up and challenge those things.
True. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Asha, we're taking some comments. Asha Mia Francis writes here, when you read the budget proposal and the actual expenditure, it makes no sense. Office of the Prime Minister budget estimate for the fiscal year 2024-2025 is 10 million, but actual spending is 490 million, she says. This, she says, is very concerning to her. You guys take.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
I cannot, I don't have it before me, so I can't really look at the figures, but what I think is interesting, which is something I pointed out so far in other areas that I have spoken, is that the Minister of Finance seems to be getting quite a big chunk of the budget, like almost 42%, and that has been consistent over the years. And that is what is concerning to me, right? I believe if we are prioritizing the budget, as I outlined earlier, the ministries that are so significant, the health, the agriculture, the education, the defense and security of the country, you should see a greater chunk of the budget going in there. But going to the Minister of Finance, 40-something% of the overall budgetary allocation, that for me is concerning. But as to the actual figures she used there, I really cannot comment on that. No, I don't have the
actual figures
document open before me.
Okay, cool.
Josh, you want to comment on that? Josh, any comment?
No.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
We have Brother David Joseph writing here. Let me see. I think he made one or two comments, but let me take this first one first from him. Because he says that because for the most part, it is the foreign investors who has the type of funds that could make a difference in the economy. It does not necessarily have to come from America, Canada, Europe. Foreign investors can come from other Caribbean country as well, he writes. Another comment from him says here, they have run out of ideas because for some time now, they have been taking ideas from the main opposition party, and the idea of the water bottling plant is one such idea. Basically, Brother David Joseph is sort of not agreeing with you, Sanford, in terms of you saying it's a strategy, he's saying they ran out of ideas. In part.
Yeah, Josh, Lofty, I respect his opinion. Some people see it differently. But in
Well-
politics, the deception is so strong is that if they repackage the idea of the opposition party and they make it sound good, they can get some political credit from that. But I really don't think that they run out of ideas, because they could have engagement, they could have public engagement, they could have stakeholder engagement, and they did all of that to come back to this. So I think it's a strategy, but I respect his opinion.
True. Well, like brother David, I used to say that they ran out of ideas. But after having listened to you tonight, Sanford, I feel I want to take that back, because I think, for true, I feel it's a strategy on this guy's part to keep the people poor, because I cannot believe after 20 years in government, Josh, that these guys' eyes would not have been politically open, so to speak, to do things that would benefit the citizenry in a much more productive way, so that the people could feel the effect of for example, the CBI dollar. So, Sanford, if it's one thing I take tonight, is that suggestion from you, and I think I will take back my word that
let me point you to another area. Let me point you to an area that will solidify my position, and I think Joshua touched it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Every tourism data, if you go back from 1990 to now, every tourism data shows that the stay-over tourism, Dominica, is what brings the greater economic benefit to the country.
Yes.
Now, every data will also show that is those homegrown little hotels, those homegrown little motels, those little guest houses that accommodate most of this stay-over tourism in the country. So why is it that a government for 20 years didn't see it fit to share that CBI money with those guys, the Evergreen and all these little guys that closed down after Maria, couldn't get back, the Fort
Garaway Hotel,
well, the Garaways and the others? Why? I mean, any one of us could just look at the data in tourism and would see that. But yet, they have not done that. The French, the Guadeloupe and Martinique extension of France and Europe is what brings most of this stay-over tourism to Dominica. Why couldn't this CBI program do something to help transport and make things cheaper and more competitive between the islands? That haven't been done. So it's not that they run out of ideas, it's that they have done that strategically. Because as Josh rightly said, all this big investment in these foreign hotels and these things bring back a lot of kickbacks, and we know that the corruption is really thick in those transactions. And the political elite, the guys around them, these are the ones doing most of those transactions. So it's not that they run out of ideas, it's strategic. They're doing what they have to, because the people have allowed that to go on. It's always the people at the end of it.
Let's speak, Josh, a little to the minimum wage, because that was mentioned in the budget.
We have one more comment there on the live feed, Alvin, and then we can go to the minimum.
Okay, go ahead.
Guvelma Hambrins is making a statement there, says, so if 50% of the budget will be CBI generated, that person basically concludes that is a level of madness. We know the challenge that the CBI is facing, yet this is the mainstay of our economy. Tomorrow, what if America or Europe pulls that plug on that sector and falls flat? She or he is asking, what then?
As I said,
Well, yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead,
Joshua. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that for the first time in the last 10 years, a minister of finance admitted that the revenue from the CBI program is drying up. He did not say it as explicit as I'm saying, but essentially, in essence, he conceded that the CBI program revenue will decline or may decline considerably, and therefore the government has to consider other areas to generate much needed revenue for the people of Dominica. So at least that's a start. As to whether it's too late for this government to diversify the economy, that's also a relevant question, because Claudius made the point. Over the years, this government has generated significant revenues from the CBI program. But unlike St. Kitts, unlike Antigua, to name a few, we cannot really point our fingers at any viable, sustainable project other than the hotels, the range and company that this government allowed the CBI program to develop. We had agriculture. This government never took the opportunity to take some of the CBI funds to grow agriculture in the country, whatever way, whatever mode of development within that sector. That did not happen. In sports, that did not happen. In the financial sector, that did not happen. In tourism, yes, these hotels have been constructed, but we have not done enough in marketing. We have not created the infrastructure in Dominica to attract the people other than those coming from Guadeloupe and Martinique for World Music Creole Festival and one or two little festivals here. And Claudia said it. Even with the flow of these French people, this government did very little to facilitate the growth of regional tourism. And we can make mention of several areas where this government has failed to use the CBI program to develop this country. Again, we can make that analysis and jump to the conclusion by looking at what St. Kitts did with its revenue, looking at what St. Lucia did with its revenue, looking at what Antigua did with its revenue. And then you will see a vast difference between Dominica and our neighbors in terms of economic development. It's just a few minutes away. You take a flight, you go down to St. Kitts. It's inexcusable that St. Kitts, with a population of less than 50,000, is 3-4 times more developed than Dominica in certain areas. You go to St. Lucia, same thing. You go to Antigua, same thing. So what has gone wrong in Dominica? It is not attributed only to Tropical Storm Erica and Hurricane Mary and COVID-19. The other countries were also affected by storms. It is because of bad governance. It's because this government, as Claudia said repeatedly, and Lofty, I'm happy that you have adopted that thinking, that it is not because they do not have ideas. After all, they have technicians, they have economists, they have accountants, they have trained personnel, the technocrats. It's a political strategy to make people dependent on the government so that they will keep getting those votes and to stay in power forever and ever and ever.
And guys, just to add the Alvin before you come in and to strengthen Josh's point now that he just made and Claudius earlier. I don't know if you guys remembered when this petrocarry plant was being opened in the Jimmy area. And Hugo Chavez then visited Dominica. I cannot remember the year. But one of our journalists or media persons on the ground asked Chavez a very important question that I took note of his answer back then. And it is playing out today in Dominica. The media person asked him, in a nutshell, how is it that he has maintained his grip on power in Venezuela for such a long time? I'm not quoting him, but words to the effect, he said, he used the democratic process to come in and he's mixing it up with some level of socialism to remain in power. That is what he said. And as we're talking there tonight, it flashed back. And so I'm seeing that playbook of Chavism now on display right here in Dominica when Claudia said earlier, our government is sort of, drifting more left as it pertains to the governing the country and having the people so dependent on them in every way, shape, and form.
Yeah. But guys, I know we discussed quite a bit here this evening, and there's a lot more that we can unpack. And you guys have did a fantastic job. And of course, our folks who are plugging in their own little questions and ideas. But before we come to a close, I want us to address, in light of what Sanford has said, and even George, the minimum wage. Because as Claudius pointed out, there's a strategy. The middle class is shrinked. We don't have a middle class. Now, even the guy on the bottom, the cashier, the receptionist, the agriculture person, the shop assistants, all of those persons, the last time that an order was made with respect to minimum wage, that came into effect was on the 13th of May, 2008. That is 17 years ago. 17 years ago, you had an order made, signed by then Minister Rayburn Blackmore, Minister of Labor, for minimum wage. As exists now, a cashier receptionist paid $5.50 per hour. That's the minimum wage. Agriculture and other unskilled worker, $4 per hour. Shop assistants, $4.50 an hour. Home assistants, with meals, $125 a week. Without meals, $143.75 a week. And that was passed 17 years ago, okay? So the minister mentioned it in his address today. We know, for example, that the Prime Minister, and Josh, correct me, you guys on the ground, they say win the diaspora, or just say what we want. The Prime Minister has been paid $64,000 a month. That is almost $1 million a year, $786,000. Let's assume that he got it for the last 5 years. I'm not sure how long he has gotten it. We're talking about $3.8 million. Just by way of a house allowance, almost $4 million.
And Alvin, just to add to your point, just stick a pin right there. He came publicly to the nation and said he would have released the Dominican public of that burden about 2 years ago.
All right.
And that arrangement is still on as we speak. So continue.
So here we have a prime minister getting almost $1 million a year, possibly $4 million over a 5-year period. But the cashier, the receptionist, the lower rank person in the economy hasn't had a minimum wage review in the last 17 years. And the comes in their budget today to say that they want to revisit that. Guys, what can you say about that? Am I overreacting?
Well, Alvin, if I'm allowed to inject a point, and I'm going to read. McIntyre said, as it relates to the minimum wage, and I'm reading from McIntyre's budget address. This current administration is the only one since 1989 to have taken decisive action to review and increase the minimum wage in Dominica. He said the Labor Standards Act grants the minister the authority to fix a minimum wage by order, and that in 1997, a minimum wage review was ordered, but the recommendations of the Minimum Wage Advisory Committee were never implemented. It was not until 2008, under this administration, that a revised minimum wage was introduced. This marked the first real effort to uplift the earning power of low-wage workers. He said, adding that at the time of approval of the new minimum wage in 2021, the government committed to undertake a further review in 2023. So I just wanted to make the point that in 2021, there were reviews and effective new minimum wages. I guess you could not recall that.
So you're telling me that in 2021, the rates have changed?
Yeah, if I recall, in 2021, this is how it went down. For agricultural and unskilled labor, the minimum wage was $7.50 per hour.
Okay.
For factory, tourism, manufacturing employees, $7.50 per hour. For juveniles or trainees, $5.67 per hour. Cashiers and receptionists, $7.25 per hour. Salespersons, $7.25 per hour. Security guards, $8 per hour. Other unskilled workers, $7.50 per hour. So since then, there has been a further review, as the government had promised they would do so in 2023.
But that took place.
Yeah, that took place. And I think that's what the minister is saying, taking effect. There will be new minimum wages. He's saying here, it is a government's intention that the new recommended rates will take effect on October 1st, 2025. It is our sincere hope that this review will lead to meaningful improvements in wages which not only meet basic needs, but also support the aspirations of our people for a better, more secure and dignified life. And then he went on to say, he said that the government will continue to pursue strategic initiatives aimed at improving the investment climate in Dominica.
Okay.
So he did not give the new minimum wage. I guess in time, over the next few weeks, we will learn what will be the new minimum wages.
So if before Claudia's comment, if I understand you, you're saying it moved from 550 to 750 for a cash.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Claudia,
but before Claudius comes in, and I'm sure Claudius will make that point. I mean, I'm not too sure by how much these minimum wages are going to increase. But I would think that the government is mindful that our economy has been saddled with underemployment and youth unemployment, particularly. And of course, an increase in minimum wage can have consequences if businesses are not doing well. And we know very well that a significant number of local businesses have not been doing well, particularly the stores in Roseau, to the point where they are exiting the market and being replaced by Chinese retail shops. So it would be interesting to see what these new minimum wages are, because if these new minimum wages put more pressure on businesses which appear not to be doing well, we'll know what the results would be. The result naturally would be making one or two positions redundant, because nobody is going to do business to suffer a loss. And a lot of our small businesses are already struggling. Now, by no means I am saying that we do not welcome an increase in minimum wages, because we supposed to have done that 10 years ago. When you compare our minimum wages to that of the other Caribbean islands, we are amongst the last. I think Grenada, in some areas, our minimum wage is almost identical to that of Grenada, and I think there's some other OECS country. So we're in the bottom half. But generally, what we would like to see in Dominica is an improvement in the economy, and naturally, employers will give increase in salaries and wages. Because if people are making profits, businesses are doing well, they will want their employees to do better. And if they do not want their employees to do better, if there are more opportunities, the employees would leave. So to keep the employees, naturally, they would raise. And Claudius, we talk about the invisible hands in a labor market. And that is where the public needs to understand why this government must leave office, because we supposedly live in a democracy, and the invisible hands are supposed to take care of our markets. But where you have government intervention, it causes economic distortion, and it curbs and hampers growth and development. So the government is now once again coming as a savior to say, well, things are not very good. We understand that inflation is taking place. Your disposable income is less. You're struggling. So we're going to increase minimum wages. But guess what? This is not necessarily going to improve our lives, because you're talking about minimum wages. We're not talking about an increase in salary. You know, an ordinary man working for the past 5 years, he doesn't care about the minimum wage, because he's above the minimum wage already. What he wants is an increase in salary. Sure. So he can absorb the inflation. And this is where the government is failing. The government has not been able to create an enabling environment for businesses to prosper, for the private sector to grow. And naturally, the invisible hands of economics will play a role where, because things are better, more efficiency, more business, more money in circulation, naturally employees will get higher salaries. And we see what's happening in the public service now that the CBI program is drying up. Naturally, public servants are going to have more difficulties in getting an increase in pay. And if it is, you will probably going to get, Alvin, you worked in that department, probably 2%, 3%, not anything significant. But in the meanwhile, we are in a country where the Prime Minister and his colleagues increase their salaries by how much? 30%?
Yes, 30%.
30%. And the ordinary public servant probably realized 1 or 2% increase over the past 10 years. So those are the kinds of discussions that we must have, because at the end of the day, I keep saying that whilst we are not the worst in the world, we have nice houses, we are driving used cars, and I was hoping that we would have had some time to talk about this tax these tax changes on importation of old cars versus new cars. So whilst we have cars, we have nice houses, but we are very cash strapped. Ordinary Dominicans do not have cash. You pay l'argent. In terms of an emergency, we have to run back to the politician. Oh, my mother is sick. She needs to be flown to Martinique. We don't have insurance. Please help us. If there's some kind of disaster in Dominica, once again, we have to go on the payroll of the politician because we don't have the cash in the bank. And that is how you measure the competence of a government at the end of the day. You measure the government based on its supply of public goods. How good is our public hospital? How good are our roads? How good are our playing fields? How good are our educational system? But also, how good is our private life? Do I have money at the credit union? Do I have money at NBD? Can I take a flight to go to St. Lucia every month? Can I take a trip to Europe? And I would say that most Dominicans are struggling financially. Most Dominicans are struggling. So when you really listened or you read the budget address, you will see, little things, you see some little niceties. But when you go beyond it, you realize it's a very vacuous, shallow, empty, uninspiring budget that is not going to bring any transformative change in Dominica.
Yeah. And on that note, Josh, as you spoke about, Alvin, just 1 minute there, as you spoke about the healthcare, Claudius touched on it earlier. There on Friday, there was this air ambulance that came to Dominica, and I'm being told from confidential sources, reliable sources that is, to basically pick up a 3 months old from the ICU unit in Dominica. And the very reliable sources at the PMH basically told me, Lofty, we have the knowledge. We don't have the tools. We don't have the equipment to help that 3 months old baby. And so the parents of that child had to, whatever they had to do to fly her out to one of the French neighboring countries for further medical assistance. And so we wish that baby well, very well indeed. But that basically concretizes the point that Josh and Claudius made tonight. If our healthcare system is not up to par, what is the real impact of these big monies that we hear in passing through budgetary processes every year, and it is not being made alive? It is not coming alive in the lives of the people. And so I just wanted to raise that point in terms of, just solidifying some of the points that was echoed before.
All right. So Lofty, I want to come in because Alvin asked a question about the minimum wage, right? And he gave some information that I want to correct, Alvin. The $64,000 a month is for the residence of the Prime Minister. That is just rent and where he lives. Mm-hmm. He has a salary of about $15,000 added to that. So you're talking about 64 plus another 50, about $80,000 that goes to this Prime Minister.
So that 64 is just rent, you said?
Yes, that's just rent. That is not inclusive of his salary. His salary is on a different level. And I want to go back there because you all said 30%, but 30% is really the increase over a 1 year period. For the past 20 years, from 2000 to 2025, the Prime Minister's salary and his cabinet ministers has gone up by 131%.
Wow.
So I did a study of the parity, the comparison of the minister's salary to a nurse.
Give me that number again. 100 and what you said?
131%.
All right, let me write this down.
So if you go back and you look at the salaries of a minister of government in 2000,
Alvin, that is more than the 121 in the 70s.
Well, yeah. I want to write it down.
Right.
I like figures too. Go ahead.
So
the
figures. You go back to 2000, and you take a minister's salary. It was about $4,000, and you come now to 2025. It's about $10,000 when you round up all the various perks they get with that. About $10,000. So that means from 4 to 8 would have been 100%, and then that other 2 would have added, so you come about 141. The Prime Minister's salary moved from about $5,000, $6,000 to about $15,000 now. So that again shows you the amount that has increased. But the civil servant has only gone up about 9%, because it was always a 001, 003, 00 double bubble. So the civil servant salary, the nurse salary, has only gone up just about 9% over the last 25 years. And that is why When Thompson Fountain made the pillar that we need fair wages, the government had to react. Again, this budget is a reactive budget, and a lot of Dominicans are observing. People have a conversation with us saying that, because if you notice the minimum wage of $12 that was proposed by Dr. Fountain, they had to come back and say, well, we have a committee in place that will look at it. And that's why, Josh, they couldn't actually give a figure, because they said they appoint a committee to look at it, and then they will come up with some results, which is the deception of the government. Because you realize last week or 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister chastised Thompson Fountain for making the observation that we need $12, which is about $2,000 a month for the person working the minimum wage, right? But Josh made a point that it may have consequences, and yes, but we cannot discuss a minimum wage increase in isolation. We have to look at the wastage that is happening in government, and the inefficiencies that is happening in government. You have to look at the private sector viability now versus what it will be in a growing economy. I think Josh kind of came back to speak about that later. The private sector is underperforming because the conditions that is necessary for them to thrive is not happening. The government is putting its hand in everything. The government has run away the banks. If people are not talking about that, and the banks are being very diplomatic and playing their political correctness well. All our international banks were driven out of the country because the government take over the construction sector. People are not willing to talk about it. That is the truth. Long-term loans, your long-term loans portfolio, if they are shrinking as a big institution, as a bank, that is how you can sustain employment and sustain your growth and your longevity. If that is shrinking on you by the day because the government has the biggest hand in the construction sector in Dominica, what do you expect them to do? They will run away. So most of our international banks run away because
before you go any further, I would like you to expound on that point for the listeners to really understand what you mean when you say that the government has caused these banks to run away. You spoke generally, but maybe you should explain about mortgages. In the past, a farmer would go to the bank, take a loan for those who did not build the cash. Take a loan. When he takes a loan, it means that there is interest. The bank profits from the interest. We would save, the bank takes that money, gives another mortgage, because banks operate on interest. They have to make a profit. That's how they pay their workers. That's how they sustain their existence. So, Clarence, I'm just saying, maybe you could expand on that.
And you started doing a good job, because a mortgage is a 20 to a 30-year loan, right? And so that is longevity. So if a bank gives out a mortgage for 30 or 20-year mortgage, they have a guarantee that they're going to have some income and through their capital and their interest over the next 30 years. But if that portfolio of long-term, which is a more secure loans, right? Because you can come in, you can ask for an extension, they can work out something for you, and you can move that 20 to 30, maybe 40 years old, you can pass it on to your children. You have what they call insurance to some of those loans, and all this thing makes them very secure and less risky. So if that portfolio in a business institution is shrinking because the government MMC has taken out all the construction of all the apartments, and they have other private companies doing all the government homes, the people no longer looking to build. When I grew up as a young man, my goal was at 17, 18 to build a house, start a family. Young people looking to inherit what their parents have now. They don't have the drive to people not buying lands and buying property and building homes of their own. They're waiting on the government. So the government has taken over the construction sector and in so doing, they have disseminated the loan portfolio of many of these international banks. And as such, they live. And that will bring, again, a set of problems with it, with international transfers and all this stuff, right? We're not even going into that yet. But that is what has happened. So the minimum wage cannot be just discussed in isolation, because if you bring up the minimum wage, it means that people have better salaries. If you're living in the countryside, you don't have rent to pay because you're still at your mom's home, you have an extra, you can go take a loan and build a house and do something, and the economy will grow, and by extension the businesses will have more consumption, etc., etc., and as such they can then meet the minimum wage. But if you have a shrinking economy where the government have its hand in every productive sector, then you're going to have a challenge bringing up the minimum wage. And that is why this government cannot do it. So what they do, they put a smoke screen that they're going to appoint a committee to look into it, and they'll come back, and they will never come back because they're going to call the election before they come back and make that change. So it's a smoke screen. And we know of Winston Churchill and all the committees he set up in England during his administration and how that worked out. So as I said, it's a reactive budget, and I wish we had more time to really, you know, pick out the muscles and expose the skeleton. But we do not have all that time now. But it's really a reactive budget to the 10 pillars that Dr. Fontaine, in his field, is expert in that field, has presented as an alternative to build that economy in Dominica and grow it.
No, well, yeah, thanks for that explanation, Claudius. I think one of the things, though, I will say, I don't have the figures before me too, but in reference to the banks, as you said, apart from the one foreign bank and our local bank, National Bank, as I understand it, government has a huge overdraft facility, that bank, running in the millions of dollars. Now, that too is something which, when we look at the whole conversation on the bank, is something that has to be looked at very closely, because an overdraft means that the bank is lending the government money, 10, 15, 20, 60, whatever that $1 million is in overdraft. And if for some reason that overdraft is not paid, then that could risk the bank. The bank is at risk as well. So you made that point about the bank, but like I said, I suspect we're going to have to have some more conversation on that.
But I mean, what you also need to point out is that when you have these banks living and you have only the National Bank as the competitive bank there, and Republic Bank, which is a regional bank, not really an international bank, you take away the competition. You're really crowding out a lot of the competition and makes it more difficult to access loans, credit by the businesses, and all that again impacts the private sector. So as I said, the minimum wage, you can't really look at it and discuss it in isolation. This is what the government is trying to do with their criticisms of it, trying to make the people focus in this isolated way that is not possible, and the economy will crash and all this fear mongering. But you know, you cannot do that in isolation, and we have a responsibility to educate the people on the various, you know, the wider perspective of those proposals.
Well,
you know?
well, in that vein, we have one of our folks there, Peltier, Livy Peltier. We really need to get on the ground and explain things to our locals, because they don't seem to understand how economics affect their daily lives. And then Ferdinand Lawrence says, massive program, gents. Take it to the streets with the same crew, Lofty. So I think some of the people there tonight are realizing, hey, this is something we need to talk about more and take it out there to the people. So that is just the start of the conversation. Go ahead, Lofty.
Yeah, indeed, guys. Just before we close, it would be remiss of us here not to touch on some of the concessions were touted about by the minister during his presentation. Some of them, some of the grocery items and whatever it is, for what, 6 months? I'm being told 6 months. I read. What is you guys' take on that? The smoke herring, the codfish, the sardines, the whatever it is, for 6 months in terms of no VAT-free concessions, whatever it is.
Well, I mean, they do have a choice, Lofty, as I stated earlier on. Our import bill is so high in Dominica. Like, we import almost every food that we eat. It is so expensive now. You get a pound, you get dashing by the bundles, right? So what they give you a $10 dashing is about 3 dashing. You would use that same $10, you maybe get 4 pounds of rice, and you can feed your family for 3 days. With the $10 bundle dashing, maybe just 1 meal, right? If you happen to get a meal out of it. So they had no choice but to put those concessions, because that's all we did. I think it would have been more progressive if some innovation or initiative was taken to reduce the cost of producing our natural grown food here. You know, maybe some subsidies for farmers, something that would help boost production and drop the price a little in the market, so that we could export a little more for the cost, the huckstering thing. But it's just like how they call that what's the local tablet that we use when you have a headache? I can't, the name doesn't come.
Panadol, paracetamol.
Paracetamol. It's just paracetamol for a
bandage.
headache. Yeah, a paracetamol for a headache you have because you're hungry. When you're really supposed to eat food and stir up your system, but you take a paracetamol. That is all that is. because it's clear they had no choice. We import all our foods too much, and they had to do that. That's what I would say on them.
Yeah, well, of course, we always have to welcome concession, but 6 months is not going to make the grade. It's not really going to create any impact on lives. We're looking for sustainable programs. And Claudius made a very important point. Had this government had any vision from day one, it would have encouraged food security in Dominica. Our rural places are known to be food producers. Under this government over the past 25 years, we have dismantled the economies in the rural places. We have made our farmers run away from the farms. We give them apartments. Right now, in the past, when you pass through rural places, a man would have some figs, some dashing, from his yard to sell to you. But now you take the farmer, you put him into a modern urban type of housing setting. He does not have a backyard. He no longer wants to walk to go to his garden because, he has a free apartment. He gets a little freebie from his pal rep now and then. So food production in the rural places have dropped considerably. And we're not only talking for export, and that's another problem. This government promised the farmers that it would invest in a boat to facilitate shipping of agricultural produce from Dominica to our neighboring islands, to once and for all realize Dominica as a food basket, not just of the OECS, but of the Caribbean. That has not happened. So to really bring meaningful development and to erase the fear that a lot of Dominicans have, the cost of living is on the rise, salaries are stagnant, people are having difficulties getting opportunities, it would have made more sense to cause people to get back onto the farm, if not for production to sell, but for self-reliance. And this is something that needs to be addressed because food security will take a greater priority on the international stage as we continue to be affected by natural disasters. We see ongoing wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East. We see certain instability in certain parts of the world. And therefore, this government, like any right-thinking government, has to place more emphasis on food security because it appears that inflation is not going down. It keeps going up. And Claudius made the point earlier, and this is what ordinary Dominicans need to understand. When you're talking about public servants' salary increasing by only 9% over the past 25 years, when inflation has probably gone up, Claudius, I don't know if you had the figures, but probably over 12%. Clearly, the standard of living has gone down. So in 2000, a public servant would probably go home with a disposable income of $300. Now in 2025, he's going home with $140. And that is no joke. I have seen salary slips with public servants going home with disposable incomes. In other words, after they pay their mortgage, their car loan, they pay costs for the furniture, they go home with just $140. And it's Alvin who has to be sending some money down to his nephew when he's in that situation. And that's the reality. And those are the types of discussions we must have in Dominica, because until and unless we move out from that web, Dominica is in the same place. I mean, we love this country. We can go on the beach at any hour. Right now, Lofty may decide he wants to go down to Meru and just relax. And we appreciate and enjoy that relative peace. But in terms of the quality of our life, the things that we eat, and hopefully in the next program, once we talk about food security, we'll bring that up. We have a serious non-communicable disease issue in Dominica. People in their 30s and 40s having diabetes, high blood pressure, more and more. Some you never heard about in the 70s and 80s in Dominica, people having heart problems, blood clots. Those things are not by accident. That is as a result of financial poverty. People have nice houses, they have nice cars, but they cannot afford the better foods. Go ahead, Lofty.
And I think I read somewhere where a medical professional in Dominica is basically sort of agreeing with you, Josh, based on what you just said in terms of the non-communicable disease. Some of the concessions that we got or will be getting on some of the items that medical doctor is saying, hey, if the government was more innovative, then we'd be given a chance to grow more local stuff, eat more healthy, and sort of take us off on the sugary, the white flour, the things that contribute to all what you spoke of before. So yes, you're on point. But Alvin, just before you come in, there's a point that I want Claudius Sanford to expound on. Claudius, let us just crunch some numbers there so that our listeners can get a better idea of what that no VAT or concession is. And for example, let us take, for example, codfish. A pound of codfish now, Claudius, is $20 a pound, give and take. Come 1st of October, in terms of the VAT-free on the codfish that the government is proposing, how much would that pound of codfish now cost a customer? Yeah, you're yes.
Yeah, just off the bat of the numbers you use, it would cost $17 a pound.
17, okay.
Because VAT is 15%, so you would just maybe take out the 15% from the $20, which is about $3. But that is not always the case, because the port fees, I mean, the businesses have it hard in Dominica, the port, people are very quiet. I don't know why Dominicans are so quiet, but the port is killing people, The government is really sucking the last blood out of the port and Dominicans there, and the business people are those who really pay the price, and they don't have a choice. I mean, I speak to some of the businesses, they would really like the price to be at lower, because they too have to buy it at the end of the day, and they see it. But the ports, the port charges are just so high, because there's no other way the government is raising revenue. There is no other alternative. Like, what is the productive sector like in Dominica? No factories. There's nothing. You understand? Nothing. So the government has gone in all 10 claws into the pot, and is extracting all it can there, and then the businesses have to pass on all these charges, on to the customers. And unless there's a change of government to really reform and restructure the tax system in Dominica, it's not going to be much. But off the bat, just $3 less. So you still pay $17 for a pound of codfish. I'm lovely.
So it's right there. Alvin, yes, thanks.
Just very quickly though, in terms of what the point that Josh made earlier, as relates what we eat and grow our food. Again, if I go back to what Claudia said earlier in terms of the government strategy, the strategy their policy is in conflict with their strategy. The strategy doesn't always work in the interest of the people, because, for example, the Minister of Finance said in this current budget, while government has taken steps to ease the burden, and he's talking about the cost of food and the cost of living, there are additional ways in which, as an individual and household, can reduce expenses. He said, adding that one such measure is the revitalization of backyard gardening, which can provide fresh vegetables and herb year-round, lower food bills, and promote healthier eating. But then when you take the people of Cassibrus and you put them in an apartment, you take the people of Piditsava and you put them in an apartment, you take the people wherever villages again there and you put them in apartments, how are these people in the apartments going to do backyard gardening? Unlike what existed on the previous administration, under the Eugenia Charles administration and Patrick John, you had Bath Estate housing scheme. People had a backyard and a front yard they could grow. You had the Royal Bank housing scheme. You had the Simon Boulevard housing scheme. You had the Cadenville housing scheme. You had the housing scheme in Point Michel. I mean, you had housing schemes all over the country. And even if it's a little 10 by 10 you had, my mother-in-law had a house in Bath Estate, and you'd be surprised among the things she was growing in that backyard. She had a coconut tree there getting coconut water. She was growing side. She was growing tomatoes, a whole bunch of stuff. But if our housing policy now is that of apartments, how are you going to do the backyard gardening? So it goes back to what Claudius was saying earlier. The strategy is one, to keep in poverty, do not raise the minimum wage or keep it at minimum. Do not raise the salary of public officers, keep it at minimum. Do not give the private sector a hand in the economy of the country. Allow the banks to leave. And certainly that in itself cannot stimulate an economy. I know we are coming close to close, and definitely I see from the folks on our live, I mean, they are really, really enjoying the program. I think in closing, we need to focus on what kind of civic education and media engagement we have to use moving forward. You raised it about the role of the media. We are playing our part in Civic Vibes, but there has to be a greater element of which the folks online are asking, civic education and media engagement, because there's a lot more that needs to be said as it relates to this particular budget. When we look at specific area, we haven't even really dealt with agriculture or manufacturing. So that's why I think this is just the start of the conversation, but I'm hoping that based on, of course, we will discuss it from a production end from Civic Vibes, but we're hoping we can have a part 2 with you guys, because I'm sure there are other areas that you would want to explore, Claudius, as well as Joshua. You made mention of some numbers you wanted to share. So I'm already giving you guys notice. We're definitely going to have a part 2, and that part 2 could possibly well be the following program next week. But
given if they have the time on that. Yeah, but thank you, Alvin. Thank you. Guys, we have sort of stretched our listeners and viewers tonight by half an hour, and we don't want to be too abusive, as it were, in that regard tonight. So we have to tone it down here. But like always, all conversations that Civic Vibes, keep with our guests, we always like to end on sort of a hopeful, a motivational note, sort of something that the people can take and run with, especially as they look forward to another week and the years ahead. What would you like to leave with our listeners or viewers in terms of that high note, that hopeful note, that best Dominica that we can have in the future?
Go ahead, Josh, and then Claudius will come in.
Yeah, you want me to be the open batsman here?
Yeah, we know you get back. You're not like this to score 27.
Oh boy, I was about to say, well, do not consider me to be a West Indian opening batsman. All right, I'd prefer to be an Australian or an English opening batsman here,
He's an umpire, so just watching.
But guys, I mean, as much as I would love to be optimistic, and I would like to raise the hopes of Dominicans, I can't do this with the government of Dominica. If I were to tell Dominicans that things will get better under this government, I would be a hypocrite. What I can tell Dominicans is to be more responsible for ourselves. And being more responsible would mean to be more self-reliant. Those with backyard space, make a garden. Try to cut on expenses. There's no reason why you have to go in certain supermarkets to buy carrots and cucumber if you have land. Get some seeds, open some land, do like Claudius. He makes time to go on his farm. I make time to go on my farm. We have to do more of that. We have to take note of what we eat. We have to take note of every penny that we have, because clearly inflation keeps rising. Salaries are not going anywhere. And therefore, if we do not change our behavior, we are the ones who are going to suffer. The quality of the foods that we eat will continue to decline. We'll become more susceptible to non-communicable diseases. Also, I would urge Dominicans to pay more attention to what's happening around us, to be more cognizant, be more aware, be more conscious. Listen to more Civic Vibes. Make sure you don't listen. You always listen. Make sure you don't miss it on Sundays. Listen to programs which can elevate our thinking, because at the end of the day, what we eat, what we think, what we drink will determine the quality of our lives. And of course, above all, we have to continue praying and trusting in the Supreme Being. And we have to call out things for what they are. Dominica right now is in the crossroads. The economic environment in Dominica is not the best. Yes, $1.4 billion. A lot of that is not going to infiltrate into the homes of Dominica. The international airport, the majority of the labor force, foreigners. Most of the capital projects, foreigners. On another program, Claudius will explain to us Why is that the multiplier effect is so small? Because in most countries where you have a capital project over $1 billion, you would find the economy of Dominica swelling. Not even the Westland environment and environs is benefiting significantly from the construction of the international airport, because the monies which are supposed to go into circulation are being withheld by the workers. They send their money back. They're not renting apartments. They have their own apartments. They're not buying vegetables in the market. So we have to face that reality, Dominicans. Take note of what's happening. Take more control of ourselves. And hopefully at the next polls, we'll get a change of government. An opportunity will present itself where we'll have that opportunity to say enough is enough. This Dominica Labour Party government, its leaders are tired. Some of them never had the vision, and generally they are tired. The Prime Minister is exhausted and he needs to go. And we do not want to wait for the last minute. Those who are on the platform, it's not too early to start campaigning. It's not too early to start canvassing. It's not too early to make sure that your neighbors have their IDs. You have your IDs. So when the opportunity presents itself to re-register or to confirm, you will be able to do that. And therefore, the next poll, you will ensure that we have a change of government. Gentlemen, as I said from the onset of the program, it's always a pleasure to be with you all. You know, Alvin and Lofty, your programs are always on another level. I wish if every radio station would carry your programs. I can't recall ever tuning in to Civic Vibes and not being educated. Tonight, yeah, I got an education. I mean, I do not want to inflate the head of Claudius, but clearly when Lofty said, you know, two intelligent gentlemen, the finest in Dominica, I do not want to put myself there, but I will say Claudius Sanford, he knows economics. He's one of the better lecturers on the island. It's really sad every time I listen to Claudius that the Kalinago people and certain politicians did not really appreciate the brilliant mind of Claudius. But I'm always happy to be in his presence. And tonight, of course, I learned from him.
Better days, better things ahead, Josh.
So, gentlemen, thank you for the invite. And to your listeners, have a good and pleasant evening and a good and great week and month. God bless.
God bless. God bless, Josh. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh.
All right. Thank you very much, Josh. You have been so humble.
He bat not out.
I understand that.
He bat not out. He didn't score a zero.
I understand that, but thanks for the compliments nonetheless. In conclusion, I do not think there is much I can say more than what Joshua has said. I think he said it very, very well. And his name is also very popular in the Kalinago territory. I want him to know that as well. Yeah, so whatever the future holds, I want him to bear that in mind. But I just want to say to the listeners and those who will come across, you know, maybe the conclusion of this program, that we have a responsibility as a Dominican to understand and really appreciate that the budget, the government budget, is really significant in our lives as citizens of this country. It is what shapes access to services. So the healthcare that we have now, the state is in, is because of the government management of the budget, the resources of the country. The garbage disposal that we afraid to talk about because we don't want to look at it and how untidy it looks around the country is because of the management of the resources in the budget. The opportunities that we have, the economic opportunities that we have or we don't have to build wealth, to create better standard of living for ourselves and our families is directly related to the management of the resources of the state, which is in the budget. And the fairness in society, our judicial fairness, our ability to be able to reason in a very civic and civilized manner has to do with that, the fairness that justice is laid out in the country. So we have a responsibility to learn more about the budget. It's not just a document. It is a tool for the development that affects every citizen in a developed country. So we need to pay attention. The budget can transform our lives in a positive way or in a negative way. And we have seen over the years the repetition, the copy and paste approach that this government had to the matters of our resources of state. And we now should look at the results. Let's start being more emboldened to look at the results of how our resources are spent. So I encourage every citizen to learn about your country's budget and advocate for priorities that benefit your community. If your healthcare in the country is suffering, don't be quiet about it. You know, learn about what is going on and advocate for better. And you always have an alternative. The principle one in economics says that there is always a trade-off. It means, therefore, we always have an alternative. And even in governance, we have an alternative. And we have the authority and the power within us to choose a better alternative, to choose a better path. And I will leave that with you tonight to challenge you to look for that better alternative. Let us put quality over just power, words, you know. And we see this long 3 hours of words, but we have had that before. Let us look at the results. And let us, as Joshua says, take responsibility for our own upliftment, our own well-being. And that is also has to do with our sovereign, you know, adult suffrage, our ability to use that X, you know, to influence where our life and our livelihood go. So thank you again for the opportunity, Josh, to be with you tonight and to exchange. And thank you very much, Mr. Thomas and Lofty, for giving us the opportunity to help in the education process that is so necessary in this country.
All right, Claudius, thank you, my brother, very, very much indeed. We at Civic Vibes, we truly appreciate you guys coming on tonight. I know, Josh, you gave your closing remarks already, but there's something, a very troubling situation in Dominica. You're a lawyer, Josh, the gun situation that seems to be spiraling out of control. Just touch it in 2 minutes, and maybe when you come back next week, you can elaborate.
Yeah, well, I have to examine the budget address to ascertain whether the government has decided to place adequate resources within our system to tackle this gun violence, because that is important. It is one thing to make money and to spend money. It's another thing to be able to spend the money in a safer environment. And it's all of us concerned that we pay attention to what's happening with our youth, particularly our young men. So in a subsequent program, maybe on the next occasion when we have part 2, we will spend some time looking at how this government has addressed youth affairs, particularly young men. Given that we do not have a rehabilitation center, we do not have training schools, we have seen the decimation of agriculture in the rural places. Young men will once engage in agriculture. We continue to suffer brain drain. The young women are leaving, attaining more education, whilst the young men are out there sitting on the block. So Claudius, who himself has been involved in youth development, I'm sure will weigh in on that subject. It is of vital significance that we do. Thank you.
All right, Josh. Well said. Thank you. Thank you. Alvin?
Well, yeah, well, gentlemen, it's just for me on behalf of Civic Vibe to say a big thank you to both of you gentlemen. I think what came across and what comes across whenever you, Josh, or Claudius is speaking on this subject is the way in which you relate it so that the average man on the street will understand. It's relatable in a way that it does not come in a boring or high-flonated manner. And that is what we're getting on the chart. I mean, people are literally asking. One person asked, they haven't agreed to part 2 for next week, you know. And they are engaged. I'm telling you, the amount of, you guys can go back and listen to it and you'll see those comments for yourself. They are engaged. So we're happy that our people are engaging. They say, take this to the street. Lofty and Alvin, go out, get the same guys, and let's go out and explain it. Because like I said in my opening comment, budget is not just about numbers. And you said it right, Claudius. It affects our daily lives. I mean, the government is saying that they're going to get 8 garbage trucks in this 25-26 budget. 8. So what happened? We had 0? Or we had 8 and we're getting 8 more? Is that what it is? I mean, what are we saying? Now we haven't even looked at the part that this is not a government coming in their first term. And you could say, okay, it's their first 5 years, so the budget, give them some time. A budget supposed to build on other budgets and programs and activities. So if after 20 years, you have not built on whatever that foundation was, what are we talking about in 2025? So guys, thank you for educating us. I learned a lot myself. It's always a learning process for me as well. And I really, on behalf of Civic Vibe, want to thank you guys. We definitely need to have a part 2 because there are some specific areas which I think we need to look at. Agriculture, for example, where the producing sectors. And like Claudia said, government wants to have their hand in the entire economy. Where the producing sectors and where the capital projects. How these two align to create a buoyant and vibrant economy. So I think when we come back, we will zero in on some specific sectors and see where and how it affects the lives of people. But thank you guys. Thank you for a great conversation. We went way past our time, but it continued, and the folks are there with us up until now. It continued remaining engaging, and we look forward to us doing, as I said, possibly we might do the part 2 next week, but we'll see how that works based on your availability and how we program it. But thank you very much. And all the folks on live with us, we want to say thank you for staying there and engaging with us and suggesting your ideas. We really appreciate that. I want to wish you all a very safe, blessed, and successful week.
Each and everybody, beginning with me.
King Dice, back to country.
Lots of signs, but none so blind as he who will not see. Loyalty to party is the road to poverty. As division brought us progress, our people enjoying success. It is already late. Come, let's grab our faith and repatriate our hearts, our minds to our country. My true confession is what I didn't do.
A very powerful number indeed from the man Dice. Back to country, he calls this one.
Not you, or your exploiters.
Please make some time. Please make some time and listen to the words of this song. Huh? A very patriotic number indeed.
We are where we are. We did not stand with you. Whoa. Now we live with hostility. Fruits of our misplaced loyalty.
But folks, all good things they say must come to an end.
First, immediately, beginning with me.
So yes, we must bring an end to tonight's very, very informative program, I must say. First and foremost, thank you, very big thank you to our 2 erudite guests, Brother Sanford, Brother Francis. You guys did an excellent job. Those of you who stayed the course with us tonight, thank you very much for your eyes and ears each and every time. On behalf of the Civic Vibes team, we thank you very much. See you guys next week Sunday, same time, same place from 6 o'clock.
Change is hard. Everything has its price.
Great week ahead. Bye-bye. We love you.
Country, it is worth the sacrifice. The past is past that we cannot change, but our present and future remains. Take a good look around. We have lost so much ground. Turn around, come around. Your loyalty belongs to this country, not that party. Yeah, Dominica, my true confession is what I didn't do. I watched you suffer, for my allegiance was to someone else, not you. All your exploiters, many in numbers, the patriots of you. So it's no wonder we are where we are. We did not stand with you. Whoa. Now if we are in dishonesty, from this place loyalty. Now we must turn man to country, each and everybody, beginning with me.